Councilor Lane's on his way.
It's done.
There he is.
There he is. Let the record reflect.
Nice to see you.
I made it.
You want to do a quick mic check?
Lane 1. We're going to need bigger desks at some point.
41%.
Number one.
Lane number 1.
Okay. Always think she's already on it all day.
Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone had the opportunity to read Jeremiah Doyle's obit. There's no way I can do it justice, but I do want to mention he was born November 7th, 1924, and died October 19th. He was a lifelong Newburyporter. Graduated from NHS at the class of 43 and enlisted in the Army, served in the 84th Infantry Division. He spent the war in the European theater. He fought at the Battle of the Bulge. He received several Bronze Stars. He helped retrieve art that had been stolen by the Nazis, and a movie was actually made about this. He went to New York to see it. He came back to Newburyport on the GI Bill. He went to BC and Northeastern and became a lawyer. He married his wife, Jean, of 70 years. They had 5 children. He was a small-town lawyer. He served as the director of the Newburyport Cooperative Bank, member of the City Council, Newburyport Water Board, and Newburyport Housing Authority. His list of contributions to this community goes on and on. I recommend folks take a moment to read the obit if you get a chance. Let's keep his family in our thoughts and prayers this evening. Thank you. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd be happy to call the roll for the City Council meeting of October 30th, 2023. Councilor Vogel.
Present.
Councilor Wallace.
Here.
And Councilor Wright.
Here.
Councilor Z. Here. And Councilor Cameron.
Here.
Councilor Donahue.
Present.
Councilor Khan.
Present.
Councilor Lane.
Here.
Councilor McCauley.
Here.
Councilor Preston.
Here.
And Councilor Shan.
Present.
11 present.
All right. Late files.
There are 3 late files. There's a communication 515, which is a letter from Jean Costello regarding Order 501, the resolution. There's an application 165 regarding the nonprofit pop-up park on certain dates to go to license and permits. Ordinance 164, zoning amendment regarding global to go to P&D and Committee of the Whole. And from a previous conversation with the President, we thought the Jean Costello letter, communication 515, might go to general government.
Motion to waive the rules and accept the late files.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Public comment. For those on Zoom, please raise your hand. I'll call out your names. When I see your hands, once the clerk gets back to his seat, I will cease to insist on the Zoom public comment. I don't see any hands at this point. I see one. I see a Mary Cohen. All right, Ms. Cohen, you are the only one from Zoom who will be speaking tonight. And we also have 22 folks in council chambers who will speak. So
You got a second one.
you have one hand, and that's all we're going to get. It's Mary Cohen. So, Ms. Cohen, I'll allow you to speak. Your name, your address, and you have 2 minutes.
My address is Buck Niggers and Buck Hughes. They don't have the right powers.
Oh, nice.
Great way to start the meeting.
Hurry up.
Remove
All right.
at the bottom.
I know that Roy's.
Hold on a second. Remove
I'm
down to the bottom.
I am trying.
on the bottom. One more.
I am trying.
Good job.
All right, folks, we're not doing Zoom anymore as far as public comment goes. Enough is enough. All right, so in council chambers, first on the list is Dylan Thompson. I don't see Mr. Thompson here, so we'll move on to Susan Mosley.
I'm Susan Mosley. I've moved to Newburyport 2 years ago.
Address, please.
Oh, sorry, 53 Warren Street. And I recently became aware of the issue around short-term rental units, and I'm here to say that I'm opposed to the investor-owned short-term rental units on the mainland of Newburyport. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the list is Judy Timman.
Good evening, Judy Timman, 39 Lime Street. I think allowing investor units is a mistake. I think it's bad policy, and allowing amnesty is also a mistake. And it's also going to prove to be a logistical enforcement nightmare. All this needs is a group of a dozen or so organized, motivated residents who will keep track of the listings and who will file zoning violations with the zoning administrator, the mayor, and with the council, and you'll be buried in paperwork. These units do take rental units out of circulation, and they increase housing prices. There are some very well-known studies that have shown that to be true, which is why communities who have gone down this path of legislating short-term rentals do not allow investor units. It is hard to take something away once it's out there, but that's your job. You have a hard job, and you need to do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Reg Bacon.
Hello again. My name is Reg Bacon. I'm at 21 Strong Street in Newburyport. Thank you for the opportunity to speak about this again this evening. Regarding the zoning ordinance to regulate short-term rental units, I'm glad to see the progress on the administrative licensing and enforcement components of the ordinance. The attention to detail is admirable and impressive. I'm not so glad to see the insistence of a few to permit absentee owner and investor owner short-term rental units, an approach known far and wide to reduce the stock of long-term rental units and diminish neighborhood cohesiveness. I find it even more outrageous that there are still some support to allow current multiple-unit STRU investors to continue operations instead of getting in line with other operators and playing by the rules of a new ordinance. STRU investors may be fine people who are kind to children and small animals, but they have been engaging in a use of their property that was never allowable by the zoning code in the first place. Call it what you will, amnesty, grandfathering, compromise, appeasement. Should the city make it a policy to coddle poor STRU investors who have already gamed the system for years just because they made a now questionable business decision? To any citizen-elected public servants who support amnesty for STRU investors, reasonable people could ask the fair question, who or what interests are you really representing anyway? Because I'm a chronic optimist, I know the council will find its way. Even if it takes a few more months and we have a reconstituted council based on next week's election results. The citizen awakening through this prolonged exercise could turn out to be a positive development for our city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is James Jones.
On behalf of over 300 Newburyport residents that play pickleball, I urge City Council to vote in favor of the zoning ordinance amendment to permit indoor and outdoor recreational uses in a limited portion of Newburyport Business Park. If passed, this amendment would provide the opportunity to build the 2 proposed privately owned pickleball facilities in a designated area of the business park. These 2 privately owned facilities, along with the approved public multi-purpose court to be built at Lower Atkinson, would sufficiently address our community's needs for indoor and outdoor courts while providing options and equitable opportunities for all of our residents to learn, play, and enjoy the benefits of pickleball. Thank you.
Thank you.
Address?
Mr. Jones, what was your address, please?
Oh, I'm sorry, 2 Wills Lane.
Thank you. Next is Judy Meridian.
Thank you. Judy Meridian, 5 Beck Street. My husband and I are not against having some regulated owner-occupied short-term rentals on the mainland of Newburyport. We are against investor-owned STRUs, as are the majority of the residents in the affected wards. We know that there are already some investor-owned STRUs, and there is consideration about allowing them to continue doing business for a finite number of years. With our long-term rental crisis, 6 years is a long period of time for amnesty. We need long-term rental units, not short-term. How can you talk about our need for housing, long-term rentals and housing, and still be, for investor-owned STRUs? We need our neighborhoods to be filled with people who have a vested interest in them and in the city. Homes in our densely populated neighborhoods should not be businesses. We are not a seasonal vacation destination. We are an all-year-round community. You've heard countless horror stories about short-term rentals from your constituents. You've read articles about the negative impacts of STRUs on other communities, yet some of you are still being tone deaf. As in these other communities, STRUs will drive up the cost of rentals and housing, and STRUs take long-term rental property off the market, as well as just regular housing. Neighborhood impact taxes will not make up for the impact of investor-owned STRUs in our neighborhoods. And once you allow investor-owned STRUs, it will be difficult to take back what you've given away when it does go badly. Your constituents should be more important to you than tourists and investors. Please say no to investor-owned STRUs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Meridian. Next is Diana Cary.
Thank you. Diana Cary, 33 Temple Street, which is a very dense neighborhood where people live cheek by jowl. And I own the next door part of my house, the half house on the other side of a door. If I were crazy enough to have it be a revolving door, it would drive the neighbors and me crazy. I instead have a tenant who lives there on a long-term lease. It's actually a 2-year lease. He is committed to the community. He volunteers at the hospital. He works in the arts sector and makes a real contribution to our community. And that's the kind of person I think we need to invite to live here. We don't have enough rental properties available to people, and we need more, not fewer, not people who are going to invest in a place and just have it be a business of a revolving door in the neighborhood with people coming and going all year long. So I urge you, please, to not allow for investor-owned STRUs.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cary. Next is Ibrahim.
Ibrahim, 85 Prospect Street. Good evening. Regarding the resolution referred to in the packet tonight, I stand here in full condemnation of the acts of terror that were committed against the people of Israel October 7th by Hamas. This act of terror has long-range effects on our local Jewish community. I stand here in support of our Jewish community, as well as others who have been directly or indirectly affected by recent events that transpired half a world away. I support the council having a discussion regarding the wording of the resolution tonight. The concept of this resolution offers significant, meaningful support to the local Jewish community from the level of local government. Anti-Semitism is at record levels, as we saw just a few moments ago. Islamophobia is again on the rise. Racism is again on the rise. As Rabbi Alex Matthews has mentioned over the last few weeks, the level of fear, isolation, and grief in the Jewish community grows. His job as leader and de facto caretaker of the local Jewish community is not an easy one. As such, I also stand here in support of his tireless efforts over the last few weeks in helping heal the community, the entire community. As such, I hope this resolution helps to serve this very same purpose, to help the healing of those in the community who are in need. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the list is Alex Matthews.
Alex Matthews, 53.5 Washington Street. Good evening, councilors. I'm speaking on the same resolution as Amr was. I wish resolutions like this were not necessary. At the same time, over the course of the last 3 weeks, some of the silence that the Jewish community, both around the world and in the Newburyport area, has heard has been alarming and disturbing. A lack of willingness to clearly condemn Hamas and their actions, a group that is committed in its charter to wiping the state of Israel off of the map, to wiping the Jewish people off of the map, and to avoiding diplomatic and peaceful resolutions to conflict. To not be able to clearly condemn that group and its actions is something that hurts deeply. To not be able to speak out clearly in the face of anti-Semitism that has seen a 400% rise over the same period last year, along the same levels of rising Islamophobia that we've seen in America. I can't bear that silence. And so while I wish we didn't have to make declarations of that, it seems that there is a lack of understanding as to what the Jewish community is facing in the wake of the attacks on October 7th. And amongst increasing fear, anxiety, really what is the core of our existence as American citizens and Jewish citizens of the world, we actually do really appreciate strongly worded, clear resolutions of support. Because if we don't hear you saying it, we don't actually know if you feel it.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. Next is Rita Mihalik.
Rita Mihalik, 53 Warren Street. Many of us opposed to STRUs are only opposed to operating STRUs as a business. The investor-owned STRUs on mainland Newburyport, not, I repeat, not the resident who lives at home and rents a room there or rents rooms out. I'm here tonight to urge you to remove investor-owned STRUs from the ordinance. I urge you to remove the amnesty for investor-owned STRUs from the ordinance. There are more good reasons to do this than not, as you heard from everybody here tonight who opposes it. I'm a resident, and I've had the experience of an investor-owned unit next to me in the South End, and it forever changed my relationship with my neighbors and the feeling I got from my community, and really the happiness that I had in the city. So I moved. I moved to some place where STRUs are not near me. So I urge you to vote it out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Barbara Feldman.
Barbara Feldman. I'm also short. 53 Warren Street. I'm a new resident here, and I've discovered tonight that I have a dual purpose. One, to support the words of my rabbi and the Jewish community, and recognize the unity in your declaration of support. Second, I believe that investor-owned short-term rental units are counterproductive to the availability of housing in Newburyport and Greater Newburyport. It took me almost 3 years to find a home here, for which I am very grateful, and very grateful to be a part of this community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Leslie Eckel.
Leslie Eckhold, and I'm from 36 Warren Street, another Warren Street speaker. Hi. I am opposed to short-term rentals in residential districts, all types. I just want to start out by telling you that. A short-term rental is a form of business, and businesses and residential areas have different purposes. There's no way that a business being placed into a residential area, such as short-term rentals, is going to benefit the residential area. It's going to create problems for the residential area. It belongs in a business area because it is a business. If we need a hotel in this city for short-term stays, we should work on finding a hotel for the city. We're also, I think, enamored of the internet, Airbnb, VRBO, and tourism. That seems to be, we seem to be very, very welcoming of this sort of thing. But we need to also be thinking about the communities in which these activities are taking place and keeping those communities healthy. Again, I think we tend to look at business rights and look at them first rather than residential rights. Another concern I have is the lack of control that the residents will have for short-term rentals, and I'm concerned that what will happen is that the policing of short-term rentals is actually going to have to move to the public and the residents in the neighborhoods. I don't think that's a healthy place for us to be. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Eckold. Next is Brent Murphy.
Brett Murphy, 2 Marsh Street. I'm here representing the Whittier Votech School Committee, along with my colleague, Donna Holliday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Next is Sue Benvenesti, 51.
Sue Benvenesti. Hi. My name's Sue Benvenesti. I live at 51 Milk Street. Having previously lived in a densely populated neighborhood in Boston, I have experienced firsthand the burdens residents shoulder regarding code violations, noise, parking, and safety when their neighbors become more transient as condos and neighboring properties are turned into short-term rentals. I would like to share, excuse me, I'd like to share with you an experience of a close friend in this particular neighborhood whose new neighbors were partying late at night with extremely loud music in an outdoor space which was located near my friend's bedroom window. This could just as well been a party wall in Newburyport. The police were called because of the late hour on a weeknight, and the noise finally abated within an hour. The next day, my friend went to the neighbor's house to talk about the problem with the neighbor, only to find a lockbox on the door with a list of rules posted for the guests. It took 24 hours of sleuthing to find the name associated with the property because the owner was listed under an LLC in Idaho. This is what a short-term investor can be. An investor's short-term rental unit can be, and because the host is absent, ultimately it will be the neighbor who has to initiate the call and loses their quality of life. I wonder if there are proponents for investor short-term rentals here who don't even reside in Newburyport. If so, it is disconcerting to think that the desires of the people wanting investor short-term rentals could trump the needs of your resident constituents who are asking only for their quality of life to be protected from such zoning changes. I recently attended a council meeting entertaining up to 40 housing units in the Brown School to help address the needs for affordable housing. I find it ironic that this same body is entertaining investor short-term rentals on the mainland, which only exacerbates the housing problem. Lastly, I find it egregious that the council would consider amnesty for anyone who is already running short-term rentals.
Thank you, Ms.
Please vote no.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Next is Ben Harmon.
Ben Harmon, 298 High Street. I want to thank the council for your diligent work in crafting this ordinance to address short-term rental units. I appreciate the council's willingness to compromise in order to get something done on this issue. While I support making progress to regulate short-term rentals in our city, I hope you will reconsider including investor properties at this time. The impact of allowing investor properties on our long-term rental and permanent housing stock is at best unknown, and at worst will exacerbate our affordable housing problem. And we can move forward with owner-occupied short-term rentals as a good first step, without imposing further risk to our neighbors and implement regulations to inform future phases in our city. I ask you to be measured in your approach so we don't expose residents to corporate-owned hotels in their backyards.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harmon. Next is Mary Krejci.
Mary Krejci, 232 High Street. Approving this ordinance as it stands is opening a Pandora's box, which is to say that once you allow something, it's very hard to pull it back if you decide it's not working. I'm not against all short-term rentals, but I'm concerned that you exercise prudence in making this decision. I live in Ward 3, and I've been concerned about maintaining the neighborhood feel and protecting our residents from disturbances from the short-term rentals that are around. Not just from noise and trash, but also from parking violations and not being able to recognize your own neighbors. You have distributed to you a map of Ward 3. I took a listing from last fall that broke down by ward all the registered short-term rentals and looked at only my ward. The ones you see there in red are investor-owned. The ones that are yellow are owner-occupied. If you look at them, you'll see that there are a couple clusters where there are 3 to 5 within a very short distance from another. And that means that they're taking up parking spaces on the street. I've already heard stories about the ones on Boardman and Merrimack imposing on the parking in that neighborhood. And so I think we need to think about not only the investor-owned, which I think we should not allow in residential neighborhoods, but also the positioning, the clustering of any short-term rentals where it's going to impose on the parking restrictions for residents. In fairness, I will say that one of those units that I looked at on Boardman Street was listed on Verbo, and I was impressed to see that they prohibited parties. I'd like to see that as part of our regulations across the board. However, they have 1 king size, 2 queen size, and 2 bunk beds. So the number of cars that are probably going to be generated by all those adults that are going to be staying there is probably prohibitive. And we're not doing anything to limit that. I know you're eager to wrap this up, but I don't want you to do it in haste. I promise you, I will not vote for any counselor who votes for this ordinance as it stands.
Thank you, Ms. Krejci.
Thank you.
Next is Nancy Caswell.
Hello, Council. Nancy Caswell, 3 Jefferson Court. Just wanted to touch on 3 things in your packet this evening, one of them being the Whittier letter that is in your packet. I want to encourage you to move forward with that Whittier letter. I think it's really important that we get ahead of this, watching this across the Commonwealth, and voting that's been going on most recently, and its way of approval. So I want to encourage you to move forward with the Whittier letter. The second is, as a business owner here in Newburyport, I also own Bryan on 17 State Street, no longer 25 State. I wanted to encourage the process that is put in place for your short-term rental ordinance. As a business owner who goes through a very similar process for my liquor license here in town, I think it's something that can be achieved successfully if you are to put it forth for a vote today and you do move forward. So I just wanted to speak from experience that I've gone through that process and do believe that it's a good process to move forward with. And I do believe that it's important for council to become the enforcer at this point of short-term rental and eliminate the burden of local neighborhood or neighbors having to be faced with this. And lastly, I just want to touch base on the current street and sidewalk plan that's been put forth. As a past resident of Ashland Street, I just wanted to acknowledge that I would love to see that street being pushed forward a little bit more. Certainly a street on our ward that is driven by 2 commercial properties up top with the gas station and natural grocer, and then down below with the auto body as well. It would be great to see that street improved sooner rather than later, as it's not a double lane street and we have families on it. We also don't see Merrimack Street on that. As somebody who's been using Merrimack Street for the last 18 years, I would encourage us to revisit that street. Not sure if it didn't make the list simply because we see it as a bigger investment, but would love to see us focusing on Merrimack Street. And lastly, I'll leave you with Mosley. As somebody who travels with my dog, I'd love to see the street, the sidewalk completed on Mosley as well. I think the families there deserve a safe sidewalk to access the schools and be able to access any open spaces in the parks. So kudos to our director for acknowledging a new report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I think it's Joan Dangel.
Correct. Good evening. I'm Joan Dangelmeyer, 2 Savory Street here in Newburyport. I'm here to discuss the future plan for the streets and the sidewalk. Why? Because if you come down Savory Street, which doesn't have a lot of traffic, but would affect many people in this community, because I have a lake, we can call it Lake Savory. The infrastructure of the street has deteriorated. It's a health risk, it's dangerous, and would like to have this reconsidered for future work to be done so we can correct the things I just spoke about. Thank you for your time. Good night.
Thank you.
Next is Ryan Burke.
Thank you, council members. My name is Ryan Burke. I live on 26 Eagle Street. I moved to Newburyport from San Francisco 2 years ago. I grew up in Haverhill, though, and spent the last 20 years living and working outside of New England. I decided to bring my family back from California because I love the North Shore. But the approach being considered to ban investor-owned STRUs is alarming, and in my opinion, very un-New England. I've worked for Airbnb for the last 5 years. This is Airbnb corporate, but I'm also a host with my business. I'm not here in that capacity, but as a concerned citizen. I run our global quality program for Airbnb. So I touch party bans, I touch a lot of the policies, and making sure that hosts do a really good job with the guests and communities that they serve. We also have a global system, as I mentioned, that screens for any guests who intend to use our platform to throw a party. And with some of these protections, and we're increasing our investment there, I feel that investor-owned STRUs, they should be regulated in Newburyport, but in a way that is balanced. And therefore, I'm not in favor of an outright ban, but amnesty until a long-term plan could be put in place that would allow room for a logical number of investor-owned STRUs. The thing to keep in mind is that investor-owned STRUs, they are a housing product. They are a short-term housing product that meets the needs of certain travelers and their families. And we need to keep that in mind to be a dynamic community together. There are people in your community who run these investor-owned STRUs and other people that benefit from the little economies that they create. To just explicitly call it a need, there are many families here that have, they're pregnant, they're about to have their second, their third child, and being able to put the grandparents in from out of town in a short-term rental where they could gather, which is different than a hotel room and different than a long-term rental, is important to our communities.
Thank you, Mr. Burke.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Stephanie Nikitic.
Stephanie Nikitic, 93 High Street. So 2 things. One, I do ask the council to approve signing the Whittier letter. Thank you. Second of all, after months and months, I'm standing here supporting residents who are opposed to investor short-term rentals on the mainland. and over-liberal regulations for even owner-occupied short-term rentals. So I think everyone has spoken. I actually see a lot of people in the room who have spoken over and over again. They're not speaking tonight. A lot of people feel they haven't been listened to, so I hope you will remember everyone who has ever spoken on this and listen to them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Joyce Celino.
Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. My name is Joyce Celino. I live at 20 Oakland Street, and I just have a simple request. Because pickleball has become one of the most popular activities for those of us who have played sports but have limiting shoulder capacities, like swinging a tennis racket. And we've switched up to pickleball as a way to stay social and active. And there are places in Newburyport where we can play, but they're very restricted because if they're in or nearby a residential area, I will admit that hitting a wiffle ball makes a noise, okay? And it can be annoying to hear that constantly. But because you have to share a tennis court to play pickleball, you are taking over another sport. So I am speaking in support of James Jones' suggestion that we use some of the industrial park parking lot off of Malcolm Hoyt. Every time I ride my bike there, there's nobody there in the parking lot. And I think, wouldn't the employees of this company love to take a lunch break and come out and play a little pickleball and then, have their lunch and then go back and work? So it would be a wonderful use of a space that is not being used very much. So to modify the zoning in order to allow the possibility of putting pickleball courts in that area would be a wonderful thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And last is Jane Snow.
Jane Snow, 9 Coffin Street. I do greatly support all the time and the effort that the council has put into the ordinance, and I think it has some good things and some things that it's not that I don't think that they're good things, but I find it difficult because we have had a lot of public comment and a lot of the residents have come forward, people that you've normally never seen in chambers, and said that they're against the investment-owned short-term rentals. I said I spent about 25 hours of my life a couple of weeks ago and took the list that came from the state and divided it all out and gave it to you. And so I'm just going to give you a couple of high points of the list to help you think about as you're deliberating. There are 76 short-term rentals listed on the mainland and 75 that are listed on Plum Island. And again, that's according to the state list. I'm not the guru that can go through all of the internet and find them. There are 30 on the mainland that are non-owner occupied, and there are 12 short-term rental units that have owners that have 2 units, and that I could find, because sometimes you can't figure out the names, and there are 12 LLCs in the mainland. So think about that, and think positive, because after all your hard work tonight, tomorrow night is trick or treat, and you can fix it all with a candy high like you won't believe. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Snow. And that is it for public comment. All right, mayor's comment.
Good evening. I don't usually feel like an opening act, but I feel like that tonight a little bit. But I just want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. You know, like this is what a community is, right? When you can come out and be part of the process. So, you know, a lot of people stay home and don't listen and pay attention, but I want to appreciate everyone for coming out tonight. I just want to apologize for how this started tonight with public comment. I think the council president's right. Maybe we stop doing public comment via Zoom for a while. And I challenge those people who keep calling in to come on down here and do it in front of us down here. I'd like to see that. Anyways, happy Halloween Eve. I wanted to thank everyone who came out to City Hall Trick or Treat on Thursday. We had about 50 kids come through here, which was great. That was an uptick from last year. And then we had downtown Trick or Treat on Friday, which was just packed with hundreds of families. Just a really nice Newburyport day on Friday. Costumes were amazing. I want to thank all the businesses for participating. That is just a fun tradition. We have citywide trick-or-treating tomorrow, 5:30 to 7:30. If you're taking part, make sure you click that outside light on so people know you're home and that you've got candy to give. And it's going to be chilly tomorrow, so bundle up and please be safe. 8 days to go for the big election. Early voting started on Saturday at the Senior Center. It's going to be available every day this week from 8:30 through Friday. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, it will go till 3:30, Thursday till 6:30, and then Friday to 11:30. And then, as you know, November 7th is Election Day. We'll have the polls open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Check the city clerk's page for your polling location. Very important election. It's nice to see some contested races this year for city council, and we've got school committee. We have 3 seats available for 4-year terms. And I just want to thank all the candidates for putting your names out there again, putting them out there to run. I wish you all the best. I know this will be a very event-filled 8 days leading up to the election. There's a vigil scheduled for Wednesday. Just really a terrible situation up in Lewiston, Maine. The Greater Newburyport Women in Action Huddle will be hosting a vigil on Wednesday, November 1st, from 6 to 7 p.m. in Market Square. I hope many of you can get there, but just a really sad situation. It was amazing how many, again, it's 2 hours away from here, right? So there was just a lot of connections in the community with people up in Lewiston. It was interesting hearing about those over the last few days, but just a really sad situation there. The Streets and Sidewalks Plan is officially back to you. I know it was a little bit longer than we anticipated, about probably 6 months longer than we thought. But I'm really happy with this plan. I want to just thank DPS, Wayne Amaral, Director of DPS, and his crew. I mean, he's really put his stamp on this plan. This is his plan going forward, and he's looking forward to coming in. I believe we set up November 9th at Budget and Finance to talk about this in conjunction with the $6 million bond that we've submitted for the next 5 years of the plan. But it's just a really great plan, so I won't go into it anymore. But if you have any questions, please reach out to the office. But we look forward to that discussion moving forward. We hired a new head librarian, which is really exciting. The Library Board of Directors voted to appoint Kevin Burke to be our next head librarian. He is coming to us from Boxford, where he was the library director there for 8 years. So we're excited. He's going to start on November 6th. So he was in the other day filling out his paperwork. He is incredibly excited, and we can't wait for him to get started. Short-term rentals isn't the only thing on the agenda tonight. We do have a few more things. Newburyport Recreation and Youth Services Department order is in the packet, so it was moved out of Community Services Committee last week with a 3-0 vote. It'd be great if we could get this, really recognize the hard work and great work that's been done in NYS over the last almost 20 years, and start calling it NRYS too. That's what we're going to do after this, NRYS, so we're excited about that. No update on the designs for 59 Low Street. We're still waiting for final cost estimates, so we're really eyeing January for this to come out, but we're also already talking about planning that public meeting to present that plan to the community. And finally, I just want to give a plug for this. The Newburyport Recreation Youth Services is busy recruiting new mentors for its city fall mentoring program, and there's a training coming up on November 2nd and November 9th from 6 to 8:30. That's going to happen here at City Hall. And as part of the Newburyport Community Mentors Program, you get to meet the local youth. You get to spend some time with them a few times a month throughout the year. So anyone interested in that, please reach out to NYS directly. Whittier, a letter for Whittier School Project is in your packet tonight. Mayor Gove and I were actually able to get most of the 11 districts together a couple weeks ago and kind of just talk about this plan. It's kind of crept up on everybody a little bit, and it's becoming very, very real, which is really terrifying with the numbers involved. So we put this letter in. This is a lot of the districts are doing a similar letter, And the idea is we're going to have this letter, hopefully with city council backing, send this on to the Whittier School Committee. They are actually voting to establish the vote that's going to happen in January at their December meeting. It's December 13th, so we do have some time to get some of these letters together and just ask them to reconsider the process that has been put in place with the majority vote happening in January. And with no funding plan attached to this, it's really concerning. So we're moving forward with that. And then the 11 districts, we're working on a joint letter that hopefully everyone will sign on to that we will also present as a kind of united voice around this project. I'm sorry, this is going long. I mean, I should probably wrap this up. You guys have other things you want to talk about. But I will just say the State Route 1 Rotary Project, that's going really, really well. There's going to be the first interruption this weekend. So if you're going southbound on the Rotary this weekend, Saturday and Sunday, you will be detoured. I shouldn't say this. When you're going northbound, so you're going to actually be passed up through State Street to go down Greenleaf and then back down Pond to get back to Route 1. So we're going to have a lot of information out there about that. But this is the only disruption to the traffic flow in there throughout this whole project. And the state's actually been really great to work with through this process. Just two more quick things. We had an MCAS presentation for the schools this past week. If you haven't checked that out, please do. I think the superintendent and his leadership team did a great job putting together a really resident-friendly report around MCAS. Two really big challenge areas that we need to address is grade 4 and grade 8 math, but there was a lot of positives in there too, so it was a really great discussion. And we're actually going to have some budget workshop meetings coming up, which we've talked about this for years on the school committee, but really getting residents a chance before we get into the budget process to come in and talk about what they believe the needs are for the schools and have their voices heard before we get into that, instead of getting a pretty fully cooked budget and then asking them to come in and comment on it. So we're excited for that. So go to the school committee website to check out the dates and times. So those are coming up in November. And tonight you've got a huge discussion tonight. I'm looking forward to hearing it on short-term rental units. I know it's just a very hot topic issue and there's a lot of emotions involved. From the city side, we really just need something on the books and we need to be committed to enforcing it. So I think that should be a big part of the conversation tonight. I appreciate the planning office, particularly Jennifer and Andy, for all their hard work working with counselors on this, but we need something that we can move forward that we can actually enforce. And I know they've had a lot of feedback into this current iteration, so good luck tonight.
Thank you, Mayor. Questions? Councilor Donahue.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. You mentioned the work at the Route 1 Rotary. Do you know if the state is planning at any point to bring the speed limit down from 45 entering from the Salisbury?
Yeah, no, I remember we had this conversation with
the
Mass DOT.
resolution, but yeah.
No, so I think this will be part of the conversation as they continue to finish up that project. It's not in conjunction with this project, but I think, Counselor, that's probably something that the administration and the Ward 2 Counselor can work on. As far as that stretch between the Gillis Bridge and the Rotary, they haven't decided to change that yet, but I mean, I think that only makes sense for what they've done on the Gillis Bridge, and then this Rotary is really going to slow down traffic going in and up, through Newbury, so it's a good idea.
Yeah, I just think we should really push that. It makes no sense to have 45 and then have people stopping on a dime. It's
absolutely
kind of scary.
Sure.
So, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, consent agenda.
Madam President.
Counselor.
May I make a motion to waive the rules so that we can jump right to planning and development, please?
Second.
Thank you.
Discussion? All right.
I don't think it's a discussable motion, but I think everybody came here to hear us speak on the topic, so I think it makes sense rather than make everybody sit through consent and several different committees to get into it. Thank you.
All those in favor of moving everything up, short-term rentals, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Let the show begin.
So, Councilor Cameron, you're on.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I will, I'm not going to make a motion to approve for the sake of discussion, but if one of the other committee members wants
Motion to approve ordinance, please, number 141, the zoning.
Second.
Councilor Z.
Thank you. Happy to speak first on this. So I have a few comments that I'd like to make, so I ask for a little bit of leniency with the time as I'm the sponsor of the amendment. So first thing, thank you very much, Madam President, members of the council, and also to all the residents who have been so involved in this process. I have a couple things I want to talk about. The first one I want to talk about is actually clarifying what is in front of us. This is a 6-year, half a decade conversation culminating in one night, and I think there have been so many versions out there. One thing I tried to do hard during this process was to be extremely measured and prudent, some of the words that I liked hearing during the opening comments, and one of those things was not to constantly barrage with new amended versions. So we are at the final end, and I want to kind of just highlight what the keys are to this. So number one is we are here tonight to finally close the loop on short-term rentals, at least for this chapter of the book. And I'm really, nervous, concerned, as anybody would be, that if we walk away tonight with less than something, we have failed. We have failed once before. I really don't think we can afford to fail again. So I think for many, there has been this underlying feeling that what we have now is better. For those who oppose short-term rentals, they may feel that not passing anything supports their position, and those who may be operating short-term rentals or thinking of operating short-term rentals may think that the lack of clarity supports their position. I'm here to say to both parties, with due respect, I don't think it helps anybody if we can't get to some conclusion on what we're talking about. So what does this proposal actually do? Number one, let me just jump right into investor units because that's the hot topic. So to me, my interpretation of this is the beginning of the end of investor units. So the day after this passes, the day it was introduced, not a single new investor unit can form anywhere in the city other than Plum Island. That's the headline. So you've got nothing new forming. So what you have left is some units that formed during what I call the gray period of the state. Thank you very much, state, for coming in and imposing a tax without letting municipalities catch up. But that's what happened. And we cannot unring that bell or undo that. And so those units are the ones that have been the subject of considerable amount of debates. But really what happens to those is, for those that decide to do so, within 6 months of passage, they don't have to, but they may apply for a special permit, and if granted, they may apply for a license, and if granted, they may operate for a period of a year under the license and 3 years under the special permit. And at the end of that tenure, they may apply for another special permit if they so choose, and as long as it's continuous, and they may operate for another 3 years, and that's it. So when people say what we're giving will be hard to take back, that is a true statement often with zoning, but as has been vetted by the city solicitor and others, what is being given is very finite and specific. In fact, it has a hard date in the ordinance. It's June 30th, 2030. You may have a party on that day if you so choose, but obviously a quiet party so as not to annoy your neighbors. So the point is, it's very finite and specific what is being done. So just keep in mind that those investor units, in order to use the full 6 years, would have to apply for 2 special permits, meaning appear in person before the ZBA and ask for that privilege, during which point all the abutters would receive a notice to that effect and would have their opportunity to their due process as well, and they would have to receive 6 one-year licenses, which also requires a process before the licensing board. So this is not a simple thing, and by the way, after considerable research, it's not called amnesty or grandfathering, it's called amortization. That's what this, in the context of zoning, and amortization is a sunset on a non-conforming use. So it has been done before, and it is permissible in Massachusetts by the analysis of our city solicitor. So there is no infinite risk. There is no Pandora's box. It's finite in terms of time. It's finite in terms of units. And in fact, if anything, you're seeing the maximum number of units, but that doesn't mean that all of them will apply, and it doesn't necessarily mean that all of them will get approved. In fact, that doesn't happen on this body or in this room necessarily. That happens with other bodies that have to ascertain the facts around an application and make a decision as a zoning board does. So that's number one. Number two is owner-occupied is allowed, which we've heard that there's not as much opposition to, but again, with significant rules and regulations. Limits on the number of guests and bedrooms, requirements for parking that cannot be waived by variance, so we're being tight on that. The requirement of licensure, just as I described during the investor, you must have a license in order to do so. So this is the belt and suspenders and the belt that has been talked about for many, many, many months on top of each other. The next thing is this institutes due process for complaints. So the subject of much discussion has been, well, how big of a problem are these, and in what way are they problems? And there's problems around nuisance, there's problems around housing, and there's a lack of substantive data to the liking of many on all sides of the debate. Without having something in place, you can't expect there to be a body of data to pull from. You will finally have, should these pass, zoning, which will provide data on the number of permits that are issued and so forth. Even those that don't need a special permit must get a zoning determination, so you are capturing additional data, and you have licensure, and you have a licensing board which has a process for complaints. So you get due process. That's important as well. You get automatic revocation of the license. This is the 3 strikes and you're out. It was mentioned during committee that the 3 strikes could be construed in either way, positive or negative, but the 3 strikes is fair. It's due process for the complainant as well as for the operator to have complaints heard, to have them adjudicated first by the zoning officer and secondarily, and if desired, by the licensing commission as well. We are trying to build a self-regulating system. I've said that in committee. We're trying to build something that works. That's one of the reasons why I think you hear a lot of people say they don't oppose owner-occupied, because they view that as a self-regulating tool. I agree with that. And with the closure of investor, that box is closing, that door is closing. So that's what the proposal, in my opinion, when I read it, that's what it does. So the next question is, what's in it for me? And I think that's a fair question for everybody to ask, residents especially. It's structure, it's enforcement, it is protection for neighborhoods, because we are essentially, we're defining it. We are really defining it as far as the investor goes, and what you have effectively by those that exist, and by the way, they had to exist as of February of this year, is your maximum number. It may not even end up coming to fruition depending on the will and desire of those operators, as well as the ultimate outcome of process, public process with a abutter notification and so forth. So abutters get due process, they get a bona fide complaint process, the city gets something they can hang on to from a complaint process and gives them legal avenues to handle things that we don't clearly have today or we would use. Operators get clarity and sort of understand where this is going, and I think the city moves overall forward. I've already compared it to you for the alternative, which is if we pass nothing, which is very possible, even standing here at 8 o'clock after a year and a half of working on this iteration, it is not acceptable. So this body runs on good faith, in my opinion, and compromise. I have striven as the sponsor to protect that compromise. I have taken it from both sides for a year and a half. My inbox can attest to that. I sometimes wish I could forward the emails to one another so people could argue directly with them instead of through me, but that's the job of the city council, to be in the middle, find the middle, and protect the middle. So when you come here tonight, if you are choosing to, and I'm speaking to my colleagues, to make an amendment, it's as much your job as it is mine to protect the compromise that has been basically forged over the last many months. I understand that many people will be unhappy, many people will be lukewarm, and some will hate it. But the point is everybody's giving up something, and I've stood here on very difficult votes. I don't even want to name the topics because tonight's enough for one night, and I have done the same thing I'm trying to do tonight, which is to come here in good faith, try and come forward with something that works. So if there are going to be amendments to this, please, it's your responsibility as much as it is mine. It's our shared responsibility to protect that. And I wouldn't vote for it myself if I did not think that it provided protection for neighborhoods, if it provided an outline, and if it provided something that moves the city forward. So I will yield with that, and thank you very much.
Councilor Cameron.
Thank you. I am going to make an amendment, and I also want to acknowledge, agreement with a lot, if not most of what the Ward 1 councilor said. So this has been a very challenging issue. Some of you have been on the council for a while, may have felt that dread all day as this hour was approaching, because I can think of a few votes as well that I'd rather not mention. It was great to have a little bit of levity with pickleball. I think Joyce's idea to combine pickleball and short-term investor units in the industrial park would be a smashing compromise that many of us would agree with. And yes, it's been challenging. I have nothing but respect for what everyone's trying to do, however this plays out tonight, and I really don't know where it's going to go either, because as we know, this is an unpredictable one. But we've come together for many, many meetings. I've started to kind of list them out, and I kind of gave up a few months ago. We've heard from a lot of folks, a lot of differing perspectives, a lot of emails. Search STRU in your city council email, and you're going to find a lot to look at. And it's been ever changing. And yeah, we're part of what is, I think, a conversation going on in a lot of municipalities certainly in Massachusetts, and we know across the rest of the country. So, yeah, I too would like to see us put this to rest, to provide both citizens, owners, and certainly staff with the surety around enforcement and the predictability so that you know what's going to be going on in your neighborhood. You kind of know what's going on, and if there are problems, there's resolution mechanisms to fix that. But I do have, and I did go into this with good faith on the February revised way to look at this from Councilor Zede, and I think he's really done a terrific job of trying to meld these things. I think at this point it is definitely belt and suspenders. I think it's shackles, it's straitjackets, and a lot of it is around the so-called investor non-occupied person or LLC that's running one of these. And as much as I've listened, I keep coming back to this has an impact on the number of rental units, and maybe it's 30, maybe it's 10, maybe nobody applies if we just pass what was currently in committee and investors are amnestied or amortized, whatever the expression may be. Maybe it all just fades away and investors just decide, well, this is too much work. I'm just going to sell, I'm going to rent long-term and make my money. I'm going to sell, make my money, I'll live there. But we have no reason, no way to really predict how that's going to go. So I remain concerned and opposed to investor units in particularly R1 and R2. I mean, for me, this started in February as a proposal that was very limited in scope. The time was less limited, granted. And then somehow the compromise became to make it much bigger and in other neighborhoods as well, in other districts. And while that got bigger, and that concerned me, and I think I've said that all along, I did like the approach around the sunsetting, whether that was 3 years, 6 years, any more than that was too long. So there would be a number of hoops, certainly, under this regimen. But where I come to this is, what is the problem we're trying to solve? And I think it's along two lines. We want to attract visitors. That's good for business. If it's good for business, that's good for Newburyport, because we are the most frequent users of downtown. We want our businesses to do well. We want people to come here. There's an economic benefit for whether it's owner-occupied and letting somebody stay at your house for a week. That's great. That can help some people out in a pinch, whether it's leasing out a room for a couple of nights and you're still there. That's good. I think we're all generally in agreement about the owner-occupied aspect of it. Another benefit, for an investor using a property manager or doing it on their own, yeah, they're going to make a lot of money. I did a screenshot of Verbo from a couple of nights ago, and yes, there are places that you can rent in Newburyport for over $400 a night, and maybe if you do 5 or 6 or 7 nights of that a month, or like the whole month in prime time season, you make so much money that it's much more lucrative than renting out long term. But just because somebody can do it and it's right for them, and I think the people that have spoken in favor of investors, many of whom are investors themselves, great people. We've all gotten to know each other under difficult circumstances. I doubt I'm getting invited to Thanksgiving, and that's okay, but I'm sure they've certainly been heard. But I have to listen to the residents, and I do agree that overwhelmingly what I'm hearing from residents, people I've known a long time, people I've never met before, is deep concerns about it. And then you hear a tea leaf near Cushing Park of one that's there, and people just cycling through, and I think Councilor's got that email. Somebody I've known for a long time in Joppa, same kind of issues, and then you start to put the pieces together. And what we're really allowing is essentially an absentee hotel. Now, if somebody wanted to come in and suggest that we change the code of uses and allow hotels in R2 and R3, they're going to get laughed out of the council. That you would not allow a hotel. I'm not the biggest fan of zoning because sometimes it's seriously skewed in the wrong direction, either too permissive or too tight, but there's a reason why we don't have hotels and other types of business in residential areas. I've said it many times, would I want my next-door neighbor to, have moved away. Maybe they were amnestied and they were doing it in February 2023 and they were allowed to go forward. Would I want them to be able to do that? No, I wouldn't. I love my neighbors. We're not all that close physically, but we're in, I'd say, a medium range neighborhood in Newburyport in Ward 1 where it's pretty tight. It's not that tight. South End is much tighter. Other parts of the North End are extremely tight, near Cushing Park, et cetera. So I don't blame those people for not wanting that in their neighborhoods. And that's who I've been listening to most intently, especially as we're knocking on doors and talking to constituents. I think this aspect of it is not popular. And councilors will have their own reasons for wanting to continue it. And that's fine. I don't disrespect that. But I think the logic to me is that there's really no right way to do the wrong thing, and allowing investors, which other than Salem, I don't think any other community in Massachusetts is allowing. I think that's a mistake. So I too would like to get us to a place where at least we have some regulation, again, for the owner occupied. Maybe we're in a sweet spot because some people think that's too liberal, but we talked about parking requirements, so people could be able to do it. And again, there's some logistical hurdles for somebody wanting to do it, but it's quite doable. And I think the licensing and the zoning, with all those aspects, I think it continues to be strong legislation. So that's sort of where I'm coming from. The amendment that I'm going to offer, and I had talked to Director Port, and I'm going to hand this out, is simple. And I don't know how to phrase this. If anyone has any better ideas, please let me know. But it would be to strike out the language related to investor short-term rental units from the zoning amendment. And then Director Port did this in a way that it still holds together as zoning, and that's the motion I'm making.
Second?
Second.
Second.
Who's second? Point of order.
Councilor Donahue.
Councilor Donahue, second. So I just want to make sure I understand. So are you suggesting that 111B gets stricken, and then with it, anything else that's related?
Yes. And I'm going to hand some paper around about that.
Councilor McCauley.
Yeah, just a point of order. Thank you, Council President. Point of order. This is the first time we're seeing this. Would it be possible to take a 3-minute, 5-minute kind of recess?
Sure.
To be able to absorb this material that's coming out and be able to digest it?
So it's 8:07. Let's come back at 8:15.
Just going to take the pile, Jen, and leave you one.
In fairness, Councilor Wallace is on crutches. Variance. That doesn't sound very healthy.
Do we know where she is?
She's in the bathroom.
Yeah, she was going to ladies. What are the chances my mouse would die now? About the same as being bit in the face by a bee 2 days before I do it.
Trackpad.
Yeah, I could figure it out. It's fine. I can do it here. It's just clunkier. Can we also do business park so that we can get the pickleball people out of here? After short term. I do, by the way, have 12 copies of the amendment since I had already printed them for the last meeting, so if people are interested. Yeah, because it's
So, the motion on the floor is the one that Councilor Cameron just made, introducing the amendment that would eliminate investor short-term, which is number 111B, from the ordinance. Discussion. Councilor Donahue.
Yes, thank you. Council President, I'll try to make this short and sweet. I want to thank everyone for all the hard work that's gone into this over the last several months. I've been listening very, very closely, and 95% of the communications I've received from my constituents, specifically in Ward 2 and surrounding neighborhoods, have been a resounding no to investor-owned units for a myriad of reasons. And for that reason, I cannot support investor-owned units at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Donahue. So Councilor Z, then Councilor Khan.
I've spoken, please.
Councilor Khan?
Thank you, Council President. I appreciate having all of these printed out for us, so thank you. This amendment, you know, I am a fan of any amendments, even when it's like in this forum. You know, we have our committee meetings, we discuss things, we hear from the public, but I do appreciate it's never too late. So doing anything and every attempt, I appreciate that, and I think that's why we're here, to talk about maybe what will help for us to pass something that will benefit the city. And I really, so just to back up, I appreciate the efforts. We have heard from a lot of people. There is the same kind of arguments that we've been listening to. You know, I don't think it's anything new. We know what we're hearing from experiences that have been pretty, you know, pretty distasteful for residents because of the fact that it's been hard to have short-term rentals near their homes. And I do appreciate that one of the residents put together the map and showed exactly. I've been looking at it and monitoring it, the whole big picture. But, you know, having a snapshot ward by ward does provide that insight on here is how it's looking within our community. But with that said, I really think, and I said this before last time during the committee, the elegant solution. No one's going to be completely happy, and we know that. But here's the aspects that do resonate, and I appreciate that the sponsor went through and explained to everyone exactly what we are looking at. One other aspect is we don't have a capacity. Partly with the investor owned, one of the things in the table is that there is some type of, I don't know if we want to call it artificial or unintended caps, but we did limit it to only one license per operator, which is a significant aspect, especially when we're looking at the total number of investors that are maybe currently in versus how many are those that have multiple units or are operating multiple short-term rentals. The way we currently have this written is that table applies a further reduction. Further reductions in the total count will also be done by the parking requirement. Anything more than 2 bedrooms must demonstrate an additional something that's off-street parking must be demonstrated. So that will also provide some, again, artificial capping, meaning some of the ones that are currently listed will not be able to continue. So why am I opposing this? We heard a lot from people today, but I am going back to 2019, or actually 2020. And I believe it was upstairs. It was the last public hearing we had here before COVID happened, and we no longer met in person. And if all of you remember that, we were upstairs and we had a conversation on short-term rentals. And it was when we first started the discussion in 2019, and then we were having the public comment in 2020. At that time, it was a packed room. And granted, we're not hearing from the same people, but over the last 4 years, we've been hearing from many different stories and anecdotal type of experiences and situations. And during my own time of looking into this, I will just speak from my perspective because a lot has been said, from residents in terms of please listen to the residents. And I think one of the things that's our job here is we are listening to residents to the extent that we can to protect the residents. And why are we balancing or even allowing this investor-owned opportunity? And I want to explain my view on that. Here's why I think it's okay and not going to be as bad as one is talking about. The main thing I want to talk about is when something is professionally managed versus absentee owner versus owner-occupied that's an absentee versus an owner-occupied that's a professionally managed. So when I talk about professionally managed units, it doesn't matter what the classification. You could have an operator that has a professionally managed unit. And that could also be an investor unit, meaning that when you rent with Airbnb or VRBO, any short-term rental, which we use quite a bit. I'm a family that has 5. I travel with my mom. And so we tend to need more bedrooms than most families would need. But we use short-term rentals in other neighborhoods. And there's a very clear process we follow. And that is through, and you could tell when something's professionally managed, is there's rule books, you can't make noise, they have the noise ordinance there, they have the hours, they have parking, here's parking. And if there's any issues, you have a number to call. The part that is not there, and this is what we don't see as renters, is what's there for the residents, the people that we're renting when we are using short-term rentals. What I like about what we created here, which I don't know if other communities have in the licensing or even here, is that we are going to have a registry, and we have talked about being able to have contacts and a way for folks to provide if there's a problem, if there's a grievance, is something happening, there will be a way to know and to notify. And that's a piece we haven't fleshed out, and I know it's hard to believe because it's not in place yet. But we have stated it in many of our committee discussions here that part of this licensing and part of this zoning will require some type of management that will tie into enforcement. And the other thing I just really want to clear, and then I'll sit down and let someone else speak, is the aspect of why are we letting people who are not following the rules to continue following the rules? And let me present a situation, let folks think about this. Short-term rentals slowly started, they just started becoming a thing. I don't even know when it started. Maybe it was the early 2000s, but at some point you started seeing people offer short-term rentals, and whenever Airbnb started. All the communities or cities did not have that defined as a use in their table of uses for zoning. It was a need that appeared and started to kind of proliferate, and then communities were like, wow, this is a growing use. We have, like, for example, in-law apartment. That's in our current zoning table of use, and that is actually a special permit in R1, R2, which to me seems the closest to an STRU right now. But we didn't have STRU And slowly, communities are starting to add them. And I give the example of a dog kennel. Not that I'm saying dog kennels are like short-term rentals, but in the industrial park, this body here realized that someone wanted to have a dog kennel, and we didn't have it in our table of use. So that was another situation where there was a need that we then zoned for. Does that mean we start fining? And if people want to know why, they're saying, well, you can't do enforcement now. How can we trust the city could do enforcement after this is passed? And I'm trying to explain that, well, because we don't really have a zoning law that says right now short-term rentals are prohibited in the city, we can't enforce anything. Right now we're agnostic. And so litigation is how we could go after folks. And so what I'm trying to say is once we get something on the books here, that we will now be able to have the data, we will be able now to enforce something that's in writing. So that was the one thing I just want to make clear, that here's what we're going to attempt to do. And by including the investor-owned, we know we have a certain supply that's out there that's meeting the needs, meeting of people who are coming to the city. It's not like I'm trying to say I want proliferation of STRUs, and I want to really help investors make more and more money. In that 2020 hearing, we heard about people whose parents lived in Newburyport and they passed away, so the family inherited the house, and so they're using this as a way for them to get an inheritance kind of money or income. Yes, people are making money. One day we all might want to make money when we're on fixed incomes and maybe we have kids to put through college. I mean, there's things that will lead us to do whatever types of businesses or whatever needs we might see that we want to move forward in. But what I'm saying is investor-owned doesn't always mean that you have a corporate takeover. And that's the part that I think we're trying to balance. That's why I really like the way we did the current proposal, because we're phasing it through. So for those folks who are operating, that some are actually residents of Newburyport that have 1 or 2 short-term rentals, this zoning ordinance means, the way we have it now before this amendment, is that they will not be able to do 2. They can only do 1. But that's okay. I'm like, okay, we're letting them phase it out. They could eventually, in 3 years or 6 years, they have to go through this special permit. Special permit, that's another thing we didn't talk about. The special permit is a public hearing. So investor-owns are not just going to pop up and won't know where. We're actually going to know a lot more about them, and we're going to be able to have the public, the neighborhoods involved when the special permits and the hearings happen. So I feel like elegant is what I go back to. I think it's a very, very good compromise, addressed a lot of things that we talked about over the years, and I really feel like this amendment really takes away everything we really worked hard and tried to do with the balance here. Thank you.
Councilor Zaid,
I'll yield for the moment, thank you.
further discussion.
Okay.
Councilor Preston.
Thank you. So I too will not be in favor of this amendment, but I want to sort of follow on what my fellow at-large councilor had said. I've said it so many times, I have no particular interest in investor-owned property, or investor-owned short-term rental units in Newburyport. What I have a particular interest in is having a place for people to stay. I mean, we just heard last week from a resident that owns a short-term rental unit that happens to be on my street that I have never had a problem with. I have a much bigger problem with the large long-term rental units that are on my street, but that's a story for another day. But, so she had the place rented last week for a family that was in town for a funeral. A parent passed away, and the family is from Vermont. I actually met them. They seem like lovely people. And they were here because they were here for the funeral of her father for the week, and that's a bona fide need. And then the house turned over, and it's going into a month-long rental of a local family, Newburyport residents, that had a fire in their home. So imagine what it would cost for you and your husband and your 2 children to stay in a B&B in Newburyport. That's not even feasible for a whole month, right? So what else do? You go to Hampton, to Salisbury, to Amesbury when you've got kids in Newburyport school system? The point is, there is a bona fide need for units like this. In the absence of a hotel, we need to have short-term rental units. So I would be totally fine if we had owner-occupied units that could serve the need. There absolutely are not enough owner-occupied units in the city to serve the needs of the city. Therefore, we need investor units. So I feel like we have done a lot of work to come to a very elegant compromise to have enough units in the city to serve the needs of the city, while at the same time not allowing for that number to grow, and giving it a sundown clause so that we eventually have the investor units float away. You know, I am also, I will fully admit, hopeful that over the ensuing 6 years that we have, you know, we get enough licensing, we A, get an ordinance in place, we B, get licensing in place that weeds out the nuisance properties. I have absolutely no need or desire to keep nuisance properties in the city. So we get an ordinance in place, we get the licensing in place, the nuisance properties drift away, right? So then we have a database over the ensuing 6 years to help us understand what the situation really is. And who knows, maybe, hallelujah, we get a hotel in the next 6 years. May not be true, but we can only be hopeful, right? So, you know, in the end, I feel like what we have is currently as elegant a solution as we're going to get to. I think it has been a compromise on everyone's behalf. I don't think any of us actually loves it, but that is what compromise is, right? That's how you get to solution. That's how you move things forward, by finding compromise and finding somewhere in the middle. And then I'll close by saying I also can't support this amendment because, frankly, if the amendment passes, the ordinance will fail. I think we all realize that. And the last thing we should do is let an ordinance fail tonight. We owe it to the city to get something on the books. The council, thank God not me for all 6 years, but the council has been dealing with this for 6 years. We have to get an ordinance in place so that we can get licensing in place, so that we can maintain the units that we have, but we can also give a process to weed out the nuisance properties that exist in the city. If this amendment passes, the ordinance will fail. We cannot do that to the city. We owe it to the city to get something done, and passing this amendment kills the ordinance. Thank you.
Next, further discussion? Councilor Zeig?
No, go ahead.
I'll go.
Vogel?
You don't want to go?
Go ahead. You can go.
Well, talk about sunsetting, huh? So I think, first of all, as it stands is very well done. And I'll point to the Ward 1 councilor for his diligence and efforts. I am literally on the fence with this. I'm not on the fence at all about getting something done. There's no two ways about it. We have got to get it done, and we will tonight. I don't necessarily believe that there's enough votes to pass this amendment, and we'll continue the discussion after the amendment. But here's a couple of things that I would like to comment on. One, I don't necessarily believe that private homes in neighborhoods satisfies any need, and even owner-occupied per se. And it's unfortunate that you need to come into town with a family and you need places to stay and you don't want to go to Hampton or you don't want to go somewhere else to stay. That is unfortunate. But we do have some inns and we do have some private, owned STRUs, and let them serve the purpose. I don't see the need at all for investor units, and I feel most about that because of the effect on the neighborhoods. I can't even imagine a revolving door, as it was described, next door to me on the small street that I live on. I would be thoroughly annoyed. And I also believe, though, at the same time, that what we are putting in place, or what we eventually will put in place tonight, will help with those nuisances. I do believe that there's elegance in the language, and I'm very pleased that the enforcement, the licensing, is out of the zoning, because that can be changed later on. The zoning's harder to change, as you all know. It takes 8 votes, but the licensing only takes 6. So I don't believe that necessarily putting housing, investor-owned housing, back into the housing stock is necessarily going to provide much, if any, help to those in need of wanting to rent or buy homes. It just doesn't seem as though, to me, those will be big enough numbers to make much of a dent. Especially I know that none of my employees would be able to rent any homes that would go back in the market. So they're not going to be, over the course of the discussion, there has been some words about these houses going back on the market and maybe being affordable. But I think if they do go back on the market and there's enough of them that go back on the market, maybe the market will level off a little bit. I don't know if in terms of rentals, but probably not in Newburyport. So what am I getting at here? I'm going to be the first to vote, and so I'm going to probably vote for this in one way or the other on this amendment, and then we'll either carry on from there. But I hope that explains somewhat how I feel about it. And I really don't understand why we are necessarily considering these investor-owned individuals. I guess some of them who do live in the community, we are answering to them and saying, okay, you live in our community, you have this investor-owned, we should probably look, give you some opportunity to sunset out. And so I would, as we go on, I would like to see that, if we're going to, I agree with the sunset clause, and perhaps we could maybe shorten it and make it even a little bit more palatable. I hope that makes some sense. Good luck to us. Thank you.
Sounds right.
Thank you. I was pretty pleased when we voted this out of committee, because I thought that we'd reached what I consider to be a compromise that not everybody would love, that not everybody would hate, but it would accomplish in the long run the things that were most important. Number one, it would phase out investor-owned properties. They will not exist, whether it's in 3 years or 6 years, they're gone. No one can come in, because if you weren't on the list in February, you can't go on the list. So there's going to be no more investor units available for anybody in any neighborhood. So, so I was a little disappointed to see the pendulum swing all the way back to what I consider not to have been the compromise that we worked so long for. So I will not be in support of this amendment. I think it moves us away from our compromise position. It diminishes the likelihood of getting 8 votes on anything tonight. And my goal, as I've stated many times, is that for us to move forward, we need to provide the administration with a zoning ordinance so that we can clean up the ones that are bad, and we can do the enforcement that's required. The licensing proposal, I've heard from both operators and from the public, is a very strong process. It provides due process to the operators, it provides due process to the residents in their communities, and I think that we've said all along the teeth of the zoning ordinance is going to be in the licensing. So I won't be in support of the amendment. I would entertain a conversation around perhaps reducing the length of time for investors, but I can't support this because it's moved us too far away from the compromise we all worked so hard to get to.
Councilor Wright. Councilor McCauley.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Council President. I'm not going to speak on the amendment per se, but I am going to talk about it. I did take up this baton 4 years ago, and I listened to everyone, and our first attempt failed really because we stopped listening to each other. The residents have very keen insights, and we need to be aware of that. And like the at-large council has said, this is a pendulum that is swinging back and forth. Right now, it's unregulated, it's do what you want as fast as you can, et cetera. And swinging the pendulum back to total control probably is going to give us, complete control is going to give us more problems than anything else. The original ordinance that's on the table right now does eliminate short-term rentals. It's on a pathway to short-term rentals. This one really eliminates them faster rather than sooner, so it's not a matter of, getting rid of investors in 2 days or getting rid of investors in maybe 3 years. it's still the same pathway to go forward. I'm also going to suggest that the data is going to show us that the licensing component of this, especially around condos, where a lot of these investor units are right now, either named or hidden, are going to weed themselves out, because there isn't a condo dock anymore in the city that will allow short-term rentals. So it's going to be kind of a twofold, staying with the original versus, let's say, the amendment. They're both going to get to the point of eliminating, but I think the original will actually be more thorough in eliminating this by allowing them, having people come out to apply and realize what they're doing isn't quite right along the way. So as I contemplate this going forward, I do say that I've always listened to the residents. The residents have never been thrilled with investors in their community. But I do respect what, other councilors have said about having a diverse housing stock that, accommodates both long-term, short-term renters. I just wish there were more long-term renters available. I'm not going to say affordable because available. I wish there were more longer-term, 2-month, 3-month, 5-month availability going forward, and I think that would better serve us as a community as we try to build up our housing stock. Thank you.
Councilor Z.
Thank you. Going around here the horn as we've done so often in the last year, I'm just not hearing how this amendment drives us to consensus, and that's really the problem. And it's been said several times now, but impasse can't be the outcome. The time for impasse has passed, and I will just express publicly my frustration. I somewhat disagree with one of my colleagues at large. This should have been done in committee. That was the time. There have been many, many meetings, and I don't think the arguments have changed, so the conversation needs to happen. So what I'm going to do, in what I think is the true spirit of compromise, I'm going to make a motion to amend the amendment, which is in order, and that is to restore the language that has been stricken here with one replacement, and that's on page 5 of 7 at the top, to replace the date, June 30th, 2030, with June 30th, 2027. And if I may get a second, I will speak to that.
I'll second that.
So I want to speak to this because this is what I've been doing for the last year and a half, is going down the highway, finding two roads that go in opposite directions and trying to drive everybody down the middle. Here's another compromise for you. I mean, you can split the baby so much that you kill the baby, so that is possible. But I'm offering you another thing that I really think is actual compromise. It's been said by a couple people, there's been hints at it, but I think the litmus test vote on the original amendment will not serve the purpose that is intended. In fact, it will probably just drive a wedge in this whole thing and ruin it. And I'm just not going to accept that. I don't think it's right, and I don't think it benefits any of the residents. So I'm challenging you all by giving you this amendment with a second. It does replace the amendment that was on the floor, so this is now on the floor, Madam President and Mr. Clerk. So I would ask for consideration on that.
Point of clarification, the second was by Councilor Lane, and you changed the date to specifically?
June 30th, 2027.
So we're going from 2030 to 2027 on page 5 of 7.
Correct. I'm going to make one more motion. I'm going to move the question on this amended amendment.
Second.
Thank you. So we can vote on that first.
All right. So roll call on the amended version, which takes us,
Motion to move the question, right?
right, so roll call.
So I'm moving the question before you is the second motion to amend. Everyone ready? Councilor Vogel.
We're moving,
Right, yeah.
yes.
Avoiding debate. Councilor Vogel is yes. Councilor Wallace?
No.
No. Councilor Wright?
Yes.
Councilor Z?
Yes.
Councilor Cameron?
No.
Councilor Donahue?
No.
No. Councilor Khan?
Yes.
Councilor Lane? Yes. Councilor McCauley?
Yes.
Councilor Preston?
Yes.
Councilor Shan?
No.
Motion passes. Meeting 6. Leave.
Now the amendment's on the floor. Amended amendment.
All right, so it's at 3 years now. All right.
That's 2/3 vote it needs. So, 1, 2, 3, 4.
7-4, motion fails.
7-4, motion fails.
Oh, we needed 2/3.
Need 2/3. Go ahead, read it. To move the question. So, having 7, not having 8, motion fails. So we're back to discussing the second amendment.
Well, there's only one amendment.
It's because,
Yeah.
well, no, there was a motion to amend by adding, by striking 111B, then a motion on top of that to amend
Right.
your date. That's on the floor for discussion.
So now we're back to discussion.
Back to discussion.
Point of clarity? But the amendment eliminates the old amendment, but changes the date.
Correct.
Well, yes, it eliminates, but changes it. It amends the amendment.
I understand, I just wanted to make sure that we all understand what the amendment on the floor is.
Councilor Lang.
I would hope at this point we could have some sort of clarity here for, it's 3 years, this is another compromise. How many compromises are we going to do before we can get this thing through? If this fails, or if the whole thing's out, we're wasting our time. So let's just stop wasting our time, compromise on this, and move forward. Please.
Councilor Wallace.
Thank you, Council President. I just want to say that I would have voted for the original amendment for no investor units. I've never really been a fan of the investor units, but at the same time, I understand the 3 years is a good compromise, and it gives people who have been following, the state's taxation program, give them time to, do the amortization. I think that's a great idea. So I will be voting for the 3-year amendment.
Councilor Cameron.
I probably have a few seconds before I have to vote on this, so I'll stall for a little bit of time. Yeah, like the Ward 1 counselor and like everyone, we've gone through this parameters, like, well, if this was tucked in a little bit, I'm okay with that getting a little bigger, this getting a little taller, that getting a little shorter. I'm much more amenable to 3 years, obviously, than 6 years. I think that can at least offer residents, again, some regulation around owner, investor, owner occupied and all the rest of it. And again, I think we're generally in agreement and pretty much always have been on everything except the investor piece. And I know, as Bob Dylan once said, we just see it from a different point of view, and that's fine. Again, I think 3 years, it will be very interesting to see what happens, 3 years, 2 years, or banning investors, because I'm sure we'll go to our elder days insisting we were right, each of us, on this. But I do appreciate the spirit of compromise on this. I am really going against a lot of my values by if I vote in favor of something that allows investors. So that's the fence that I'm on. I really, when I say there's no right way to do the wrong thing, I think it's the wrong thing. And I think we've been told that continually by our constituents, whether we've actualized their sentiments or not. I'm not speaking for anybody else, but I feel like I've tried to carry through with that spirit. So, in part of the reason for, this was always going to have to get hashed out on some floor, whether it was committee and just kind of arguing it out there. There was no doubt that at some point the Band-Aid needed to be ripped off, and everyone's either going to be a yes or no on the various elements of that. So I certainly appreciate, the complexity of it, and, but I'd like to hear what other people have to say on the 3 years and whether that's acceptable. I am interested in a potential other amendment regardless of this, and I hope people would at least entertain where I'm coming from on that, but that's sort of where I am. To be continued.
Further discussion. Councilor Preston.
Sure, thank you. Firstly, I do want to say that I agree with the Ward 1 counselor. It's really mind-boggling to me that we're managing this now. I mean, we have literally been at this for a year and a half. We have had endless meetings. I'm on the P&D committee. Frankly, the amendment that is showing up on our desks at the 11th hour in the middle of a meeting is from the chair of the P&D committee. He is the person who could call another meeting for us to have discussed this in committee, rather than doing this here on the floor. But, this is where we find ourselves. But just a little bit of a history lesson on the compromise. So, we found ourselves, we discussed amnesty at one point in time. We were told that that was not a legal pathway forward. Then we were told that it is a legal pathway forward. And so, okay, we got excited about amnesty. And then there was a compromise that said, well, we could only do amnesty if the amnesty had a sundown. Well, okay, so we'll compromise with amnesty to have a sundown to amnesty. And, it was proposed at 3 years. And then it was proposed at 9 years. And we settled at 6. That's what we did in committee. That is the compromise we made. That's what we came to the room in good faith with. And now here we find ourselves not only with an amendment that brings us all the way, to use the pendulum swing, to go all the way back to something worse than what we knew failed last time. And then we find ourselves now back to trying to force more compromise down our throats. And it's disingenuous, and it's not in good faith with what we have done and what we have worked so hard toward. We as a body are very often criticized for the fact that we have an unwillingness to compromise. And I was really honestly quite proud of us that we were able to find something that, frankly, I don't think any one of the 11 of us loves, but it was something, and it was rather elegant, and it was something we could all live with and move forward. And it's really disappointing and really disingenuous, in my opinion, to have gone through this exercise tonight. I don't know where I'll land on 3 years. That certainly seems like the path we're going forward. I felt like we had a really good compromise at 6. We'll see where I land. Thank you.
Further discussion. Councilor Lane.
I too, I use the song, there ain't no good guys, there ain't no bad guys, just you and me, and we just disagree. So, that's my
Bed
take.
better if you sang.
Karaoke.
I can certainly understand where the people come from in how they feel about investor units. When you don't know something, it's very scary. When you have a few bad apples in the bunch, I can see where you would classify people that don't live here as having no control over what they have. Some of the best Airbnbs that I've stayed at around the world have been investor-owned. So just because someone doesn't live here doesn't mean they don't run their business to the best of their ability. I too don't like I don't like getting rid of them. I think they feel like they serve a purpose. People can come here, they can visit, they can decide if they want to be here. Check it out. I'm in real estate. Taking these back in, putting them back into the housing stock doesn't help affordability. It never will. They would end up turning into long-term rental units at $4,500, $5,000 a month. So we're spinning our tops here over what we feel an investor would be, that they have nefarious mindset when they have these properties that they offer up for use, to use our community, to come to our community, to visit, to shop downtown, to eat downtown, to see if they like it here, to visit their family. We've heard all of these, all of these reasons why. I guess my point is just don't classify somebody you don't know just because they don't live here as not being good business people or maintaining the fact that they can run a great place to stay, to visit, to become part of our community just because you don't know who they are. So I too, I'm torn. I would have taken the 3-year sunset I could live with. I don't like it. I don't like getting rid of investor units. I feel like if we had the regulation in place, we can get rid of those. If they truly don't run a good operation, we now have the mechanism to eliminate them. I don't see why we're going to further restrict it. So I will say that if it is stricken completely, I won't vote for the underlying measure, so it will fail. This will fail if this does not go through, the amendment tonight. So I guess I'll just see where it lands.
Councilor Vogel.
Thank you, Council President. I just wanted to make one point. I'm not so much concerned necessarily about how an investor unit is run or not run, whether it's triple stars or no stars. I'm really more concerned about investor units and the fabric of the neighborhood. That's really where I'm at with it, and I think that there is no place for investor units in the neighborhood because of the fabric of the neighborhood. We've heard about it, you need to know your neighbors. I mean, I don't know all my neighbors, but those neighbors that I do know, we know, and we help one another out. All that being said, we do need to pass something, and I will not cripple it by not voting for this compromise. I'll live with the 3 years, or rather you all maybe will be living with the 3 years, I may not be. But nonetheless, I think that we've done our due diligence, I think we've done our best, and I truly hope that we can pass this.
Yes.
Just to be clear, to reiterate, so we had a motion to approve, followed by a motion to amend that basically struck all of use 111B. Then your motion, not to put words in your mouth, puts back 111B with one important change. The sunset goes to 2027, June 30th. That's it. So we'll be voting on that, and that would leave the underlying. But that would be your motion to amend, Councilor Cameron, then would be moved.
Retired.
We'll go from
All retires together.
the 30th. Yeah, well, at that point, we'd need then a motion to approve as amended.
For discussion? Roll call.
Roll call on the motion to amend as I just described. Everyone clear?
With the 3-year or the...
This is with the 3-year, obviously 111B is back. So any changes that were suggested by Councilor Cameron would not happen. It would go back to the original language with one exception. 2030 becomes 2027.
And then we would vote on that.
We'll vote on the underlying.
Ready?
Right.
Yes, ready.
Roll call. Councilor Vogel on the amendment.
Yes.
Councilor Wallace?
Yes.
Councilor White?
Yes.
Councilor Z?
Yes.
Councilor Cameron?
Yes.
Councilor Donahue?
No.
Councilor Khan?
Yes.
Councilor Lane?
Yes.
Councilor McCauley?
Yes.
Councilor Preston?
No.
Councilor Shan?
Yes.
Motion passes. On the floor is the motion approved as amended.
Councilor Z.
All right, now we're back to the underlying motion, having gone to 3 years. So I will make, I shouldn't say my final plea, we shouldn't make promises we can't keep, but probably one of the public comments I remember over the past year that stuck with me the most was in a recent meeting where somebody said, and this person happens to be in the room, said, you know what, I don't love the amortization as we're now calling it, but if that's what it took to get something passed, I wouldn't stand in the way, was I think the language that was used. So that's what I'm asking you to do tonight, to not stand in the way. I understand that, this isn't going to go around the table here with kumbaya and then everybody's going to have a ticker tape parade, which was never the goal at the beginning. But I think now we're at that point where don't stand in the way is probably the best that I should ask for or could ask for, and I don't think it's an unreasonable ask. If you came in tonight not wanting investor, you move the notch, another point, and that's a win for you, so to say. If you came in wanting to hold the line on investor, you also got a win in the sense that investor didn't get crushed out of this thing. So this has been the story of this whole thing. It's ping pong until you get to the middle. So at this point, it's not about accolades or thank you for this is great, I love this. I'm just saying don't stand in the way. Give the residents the clarity they've been asking for, the parking requirements, the licensing. I thank the Ward 5 Council for reminding me that the condo docs was a big part of this too. This will inhibit, by law, condo docs will supersede. So if condo docs say no STRU, then there is no STRU. And the last thing I want to close, since I mentioned the Ward 5 Councilor, he deserves a lot of credit for slogging this out. A lot of people deserve a lot of credit, but him especially, I think, for what I now understand personally firsthand, some years of slugging it out. So I'm asking not for your support, but to not stand in the way, and I hope that we're there. Thank you.
Further discussion? Anything else? All right.
Roll call. Pardon? We have a roll call on approving ordinance 141 as amended.
First reading.
First reading. Councilor Vogel.
Yes.
Councilor Wallace.
Yes.
Councilor Wright.
Yes.
Councilor Zeid.
Yes.
Councilor Cameron.
Yes.
Councilor Donahue.
No.
Councilor Khan.
Yes.
Councilor Lane.
Yes.
Councilor McCauley.
Yes.
Councilor Preston.
Yes.
Councilor Shan.
Yes.
Yes. We have 10 yes, 1 no. Ordinance passes first reading.
Motion to approve ordinance 47, licensing.
Second.
Still think you're great.
Councilor McCauley had his hand up.
Go ahead. Councilor McCauley?
Yes, thank you. I like this ordinance, from a licensing standpoint. No, I think it's complete and all that. I just have one minor edit. I've suggested it in committee. It never made it in committee. I think it was an overlook. In section 9305C, there's a fee there. It's at $200. I'd ask that it goes to $250. And the reason being, we always try to justify what we have, but as part of this discussion now, we're talking about having inspections from health, building, fire, and so all of those things, sometimes we do them ourselves, sometimes we hire them out, and then we would also need a fee for the planning office as well as part of enforcement. And when we add up all those things and draw the line, it's over $200, and I'd ask that we go to $250.
I'll
That's all.
second that.
Thank you.
250?
Do you want to do that as a friendly amendment?
Yes.
Sure.
Is it okay with the second? So we are now, if that's okay, we are at 250 on subsection C instead of 200, correct?
Yes.
Further discussion? Councilor Zeeb?
Yeah, I too have a friendly, but it's really just language, so I'll pass these out just so that everybody has it for posterity. But in 9303, sorry, Mark, thank you,
okay.
in communicating with Director Port, as well as just further reading after last week, I wanted to make sure that the automatic revocation was as strong as it could be, and Chair Cameron had pointed out to me that he felt the language could be a little bit clearer. So we did work that, and the language is just different words, but it says the same thing, at least from what the intent was. And so basically, automatic revocation of license happens if there are 3 or more, basically, infractions within a 6-month period. And those can either be because the enforcement agent determined there was a violation and it went unappealed, or the enforcement agent determined there was a violation, it was appealed, and the licensing board upheld it, or the same 3 violations of any municipal law relating to excessive noise, improper disposal, etc. So this is the strikeout and so forth. I just wanted to clean it up to make sure that it specifically said in the body of the paragraph that it shall be subject to automatic and immediate revocation. So that's why it's submitted. And I consider it friendly, but I leave it to my second as well.
Yep. I think it's material for sure. Right?
Yeah, it's
Not
fine to
scribble.
vote on it. I mean, I just
To be clean, I think we
yeah, I
should
mean, I
vote
think
on
this was what we talked about. I just wanted the language to be absolutely crystal clear, that if you are racking up infractions, you will be done for, and it won't be subjective. The revocation is automatic, so I think that's the clarification.
My humble suggestion would be that, because you made the motion to approve, and now it's a little awkward to amend the motion you just made.
Motion to amend to this.
Yeah,
Okay.
maybe by someone else.
Motion to amend.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Second.
Thank you.
And I'll second that.
Already second, I think.
Okay.
And so that's to insert the language as proposed in
Or to
9.
amend as shown, 9303.
Do you want to read it in, Clerk Jones?
Yes, it states as follows, for the record, changing the language in 9-303, a dwelling unit that itself or whose owner or operator is the subject of 3 or more findings, this is underlined, within any 6-month period with written notice of each by either A, the enforcement agent, which are not appealed, and B, the licensing board is designate a violation of this Article 9, and it strikes within any 6-month period or 3 or more violations within any 6-month period of any state, and or any underline that's new, municipal law or regulation related to excessive noise, improper disposal of trash, disorderly conduct, or other nuisances. This is added, whether private or stricken, public or private, added, shall be subject to automatic or immediate revocation of any license previously issued, therefore under this Article 9.
Thank you.
And that is the subject of a motion made by Councilor Vogel, a motion to amend to add that language, change that language, seconded by Councilor Lane. Shall we go to a vote on that?
Any discussion? All right, roll call.
Roll call on that amendment. Councilor Vogel.
Yes.
Councilor Wallace.
Yes.
Councilor Wright.
Yes.
Councilor Zede. Yes. Councilor Cameron.
Yes.
Councilor Donahue.
Yes.
Councilor Hahn.
Yes.
Councilor Lane. Yes. Councilor McCauley.
Yes.
Councilor Preston.
Yes.
Councilor Shan.
Yes.
Thank you. 11 zip. So we now have the motion approved as amended.
Oh, I can't remember.
Discussion, Counselor Zede.
Yeah, just in the interest of getting it on the record, just what this ordinance does. So the prior one was obviously the hot ticket was the where, and I look at this in some ways as the how. So this is the annual licensure procedure. So anybody wishing to operate a short-term rental anywhere in the city, and this does include Plum Island, is required to acquire a license. The license is good for 1 year. The license is issued by the licensing board upon a satisfactory and complete application on behalf of the applicant. There is a prescribed timeline for that application process and for the issuance of the license. And the at-large councilor in the prior debate mentioned the creation of a list or a registry. This is actually the genesis of this, is also having the list of all of the short-term rentals that will be operating in the city of Newburyport. So that's how one becomes licensed. It's a 1-year term, but it's a rolling 1 year. So anybody can apply throughout the year, and their term will run for 1 year so that we stagger the work out for the licensing board. And then the subject of the amendment, but also I think probably the most interesting from a public perspective, this is the nuisance stuff that we've been talking about at length. So if you have a complaint, if you have an issue with a short-term rental, there is now a specific place for it to go. And perhaps more importantly, there is a prescribed way to handle that. So the licensing board, it starts with the zoning officer really, who ingests, so to say, the complaint, does the research on it, and within so many days, I believe it's 7, responds to that or makes a finding, and then they can either administratively find that there's been an infraction, and then the operator, if they so choose, can appeal it, or they can accept it as it is. If they do appeal it, then it goes before the licensing board, and there'll be a public meeting where the grievances can be heard and a determination can be made. And as you just heard, several infractions in a row will result in revocation of license. I just want to remind everybody that short-term rental in Newburyport is the combination of zoning plus licensing. So if you lose your license, it doesn't matter if the zoning says you can do it, timeline or anything else, you're done if you cannot get or keep a license along the way. And there are various requirements to apply for that license that are outlined in here. And I think this received more favorable looks by it, so I'm encouraged by that. And lastly, we will all have work to do to see this through. I think from the council's perspective, budgetarily will be the '1 concern. So we talked about this in committee, that the way that this works in terms of going into effect in 6 months happens to align pretty well with our FY25 budget process that we will be doing in May of next year. So whether it's additional allocation of internal resources, external resources, or both that the administration brings forward, then that will be our opportunity to make it very clear that that's important. And I think the last thing I would just say is, I think we've identified that there are funds, with respect to that. Even there are already funds that are being generated from this, And first and foremost, I do think residents will expect those funds to support enforcement efforts, and then to the extent that there's excess, then that can go to other priorities throughout the city, and I just want to issue my commitment to that we'll see that through. And I think there's been a tremendous interest in hiring a third party for a variety of reasons. I think that bears a lot of consideration, and I will keep on it personally, and I'm guessing my colleagues would join in that as well. So I just wanted to say that on the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Zaid. Further discussion? Councilor Donahue.
Is there a fee associated with the license?
$250 a year.
That was the 250. Okay, thank you.
Further discussion? Questions? Councilor Donahue.
What do we charge for a liquor license? Does anyone know?
A lot.
Yeah, a lot more.
Yeah, it is.
How much? Karen.
If it's over 55 seats, we request roughly around $2,600 plus the addition of a television, jukebox, or any audiovisual. So you realistically have another $400 or $500 of food, as well as your common vic license as well. And through the licensing process, when we are required to have a building inspector, fire inspector, and health department walkthrough, it's an additional $100 spent through the permit online that we do, and it's roughly about anywhere between $250 to $300 to incur that cost.
Thank you, Ms. Caswell.
Thank you. Then point of clarity, why are we selling ourselves so short? I know I wasn't here when that was made, when I didn't have Wi-Fi, but it does seem that we're going to be licensing a finite amount of these, and there is going to be costs incurred, and it does sound like we're maybe going to just barely cover it. And I just think that if we're talking about a business with investments where people are bringing in pretty exorbitant rental prices for their short-term rentals, I just think 250 is kind of giving them away. I don't know what we can do with that.
Councilor Cameron?
Yeah, just to say, I hear that argument, and I've been wondering that myself. I think where this is a little bit different, this type of ordinance can be changed with a majority vote, and we're continually changing fees and things of that sort. So I'm comfortable with this as a start, and we'll get some data and see how that is. I think it's significant. Nobody's just going to apply for the hell of it because it's $250. But so to Councilor at Large, his point earlier about the ease of changing this ordinance as opposed to zoning, I think makes me comfortable with this as a start.
Councilor McCauley.
Yeah, thank you, Council President. The number really was geared towards the resident owners. So, we're asking our residents to really cover just the fees that we're going to be incurring here. Investors wasn't really part of the discussion, right? Obviously, we would say that would be more, but I think there's another tax plan that's coming in as well that would layer on something else on top of that. So this is really what it was geared towards. We wanted to keep it like we do all of our fees to our residents reasonable and covering our cost and growth. We have good margin on that to cover our enforcement costs. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor McCauley. Does that help, Councilor Donahue?
Yes, thank you.
Further conversation, discussion? All right, roll call.
So we're voting on approving as amended ordinance 47. We added the language of 9-303, and we also, by friendly amendment, moved from $200 to $250 for the application.
First reading.
First reading.
First reading. Councilor Vogel?
Yes.
Councilor Wallace?
Yes.
Councilor Wright?
Yes.
Councilor Zeid?
Yes.
Councilor Cameron?
Yes.
Councilor Donahue?
Yes.
Councilor Khan?
Yes.
Councilor Lane?
Yes.
Councilor McCauley?
Yes.
Councilor Preston?
Yes.
Councilor Shan?
Yes.
11-0. A motion passes first reading.
All right, I think that ends short-term rental units. Maybe we should go back to the consent agenda, since it is 9:14.
The original motion was to go to planning and development. We do have one other docketed item, which we do have. If we could.
Motion to receive and file, oh, wait.
Oh, no, I'm
sorry.
talking about ordinance 160, about
Yeah,
the...
The recommendations have a number?
No. There's one more item in the Planning and Development Committee.
It's the,
Indoor rec.
it's the industrial park.
Ordinance 160.
Yeah, let's dispose, if it's your
All right,
pleasure.
Councilor Cameron?
The formatting is a little funny. Motion to approve ordinance, it is in the packet. It's not lined up exactly the same way as the other two ordinances. So this is ordinance 160, a zoning ordinance
Second.
As amended.
related to indoor and outdoor recreational uses, also known as pickleball, it seems.
As amended.
As amended, thank you.
Second.
And I'll let the interim chair that evening and the other attendee, Councilor Preston, speak to this matter. I was not there that night.
Thank you, Council President. So this is an ordinance, as was described very eloquently earlier this evening. It's a zoning change in the business park to allow for recreational uses. Those recreational uses have been defined as indicated by amendments made by the Planning Board, which we are incorporating in our recommendation tonight, exactly as the Planning Board recommended. So this will allow business ventures, private ventures that meet the criteria in the business park. If you're thinking of the location, it's essentially a portion, most of Parker Street, and then down Henry Groff Road in that triangle, if you're thinking of it. It doesn't go all the way to Route 1, because obviously we wouldn't want recreational uses right on the intersection of Route 1, but it runs from Parker Street down to Henry Groff, and then down to Low Street. And then there's this small piece of it across the road on the other side. So we discussed this, we reached consensus with the Planning Board. We voted to bring this out of committee 2-0 in full support of the zoning change.
Thank you, Councilor Wright. Discussion. Councilor McCauley.
Yeah, thank you, Council President. I'd just like to say, I was in favor of this because it strengthens the buffer zone around our industrial and commercial community. Oftentimes progress infringes on that, and we saw that along the Graff Road corridor where people weren't too sure they could do something or not. I think this gives clarity to those investors who want to start a business in that area, that they can do this mix of types of things, and it also gives clarity to our other business park, commercial and industrialized folks, that that's where the line's drawn, and that you can keep and maintain yourselves in the inner part. So I'm in favor of it for that reason. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor McCauley. Further discussion? All right, roll call.
Roll call, first reading, ordinance 160. Councilor Vogel?
Yes.
Councilor Wallace?
Yes.
Councilor Wright?
Yes.
Councilor Zede?
Yes.
Councilor Cameron?
Yes.
Councilor Donahue?
Yes.
Councilor Khan?
Yes.
Councilor Lane?
Yes.
Councilor McCauley?
Yes.
Councilor Preston?
Yes.
And Councilor Shan?
Yes.
11-0, first reading, ordinance 160 passes.
All right, so let's go back to the consent agenda.
Back to the beginning.
That's the future.
Consent agenda this evening consists of the following. Approval of the minutes for October 16th. There are a number of communications. Application 164, movable sign app for the Cookie Jar Kitchen at Winter in Washington to go to L&P. Communication 511, Streets and Sidewalk Plan update to go to Public Works and Safety. Communication 512, the Horticultural Society fundraising table in Market Square, December 9th and 10th to go to L&P. Communication 513 is a memo regarding Kevin Burke's head librarian, to go to CS. Communication 514, retirement board expense budget 2024 to go to Budget and Finance. Following transfers, 4 of them. Transfer 171, DPS water retained earnings, $130,000 for a one-ton dump truck purchase, same amount, B&F. Transfer 172, general fund free cash, $128,000 to the opioid stabilization fund, same amount, B&F. Transfer 173, Free cash, $21,000. Retained earnings, water, $19,000. Sewer retained earnings, $54,000. Harbor master retained earnings, $1,000. To multiple accounts, see attached. Total amount of $96,000 to go to B&F. Transfer 174. Police accreditation allowance, $102,000. Budget contingency, $75,000. Police tech stipend, $24,005. To police officers' salaries, $177,906. Police officer overtime, $19,000. Police officer night differential, $5,000 to go to B&F. One appointment, Mary Louise Gagnon, 126 Merrimack Street, to the Council on Aging until 12/1/2026 to go to CNS. Following items are out of their respective committees. Budget and Finance, orders 502, 498, 499, 500, ordinance 129. Community Services, appointment 436, order 497. Planning and Development, we have already discussed and disposed of. Public Works and Safety, application 163, ordinance 161, 162, and 163. All of those are out of their respective committees.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right.
Receive and file the mayor's update.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No.
So nice when we're all here.
Caught up?
Yeah, communication, I think we are caught up. This is the 30-day extension for acting head librarian appointment.
We moved it to a date certain, motion to approve.
Second.
This is really a belt and suspenders kind of move by the administration. It'll cover the overlap of hiring a new librarian and all. We did go through the first extension pretty extensively, and this was just an administrative order to go forward. So I ask you for your vote.
Thanks, Councilor Colley. Just so folks know, we do have to maintain a librarian that has accreditation so that we actually keep accreditation at the library. If we lose it for one day, then we lose accreditation at the library. So hence the need to keep the continuity. So is this an approve the communication?
Motion to approve is on the floor.
All right. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Is this an appointment or?
It's communication.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
all right. Moving right along.
Oh, you're saying, does it need a roll call?
I don't think it's an appointment.
It's a communication, though.
30-day extension. I'm saying
Maybe
that-
we
narrowed it as well.
do a roll call.
Extension.
Yeah.
It's a notification.
I don't think a roll call would hurt. I don't think it's in order, but I think...
It's fine, it was a point of...
We're going to be
point
here
of
all
order.
night
That's okay.
anyways.
I'm good.
Roll call, President?
No.
We next have another communication, 510, Shanty's request for an extension of Pop-Up Park.
Isn't that an application?
I think it actually came.
Did not come in as an application.
Okay, it's on application form.
Motion to refer to license and permits.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
I think we disposed of 515 and others as we, with the consent agenda, by sending 515 to general government and the others, L&P and P&D. So I think
Okay.
that leaves us to Order 501, which is in front of you on a motion to reconsider by Councilor Vogel.
Motion to reconsider and to send to general government.
How about if you just did a motion to reconsider and then...
I thought this was... Okay, motion to reconsider.
Second.
Okay,
Discussion.
all right, thank you. I misunderstood what we were aiming for. All right, so thank you very much, and I do greatly appreciate this opportunity to talk a little bit about this. And to, just to be clear, for those of you that are still around and listening, I'm opposed to any type of violence, be it worldwide, in any way, shape, or form, even a slap on the face or a bomb, to whatever extent. I'm opposed to that. I'm a child of the 60s, and I live with the mantra, you know, let's give peace a chance. And I think every summer should be a summer of love. So That's where I come from. And then on top of that, I am Jewish. My concern that I had with this that came through on, as both a late file and with an emergency preamble is that I felt personally sort of rushed, a little bit of a deer in headlights. I mean, who isn't going to approve a speaking out against world violence? Certainly, I will. But I wasn't comfortable with the speed and the manner in which it came in. And after I heard the comments on the floor and the amendment, and then I had an opportunity to start to read it, but as the letter that came and speaks to the fact that we only spoke 9 minutes on this, I thought, you know what, I'm going to have to come back and reconsider this when I get a chance to read it. So I have, and again, I felt the sense of urgency wasn't necessarily there, though I do believe that we need to speak out on this. So, you know, after that discussion and amendment on the floor, here I am asking that we have now in a public arena, to bring in the public, to bring in especially our clergy or others in the community that would like to provide some input on how we speak about this. And that's really all that I'm asking for. I'm not condemning what our effort. I would just like to make it broader and more open. That's why I asked for reconsideration.
Councilor Khan, and then Councilor McCauley.
Great, thank you, Council President. You know, we worked together on the floor, but I will say, when I sat down, I read it, and I was really hoping we'd send to committee because, you know, when you think about what has happened, and I think because we have a very close connection with the synagogue in Newburyport, I reached out right away to Rabbi Matthews and a lot of my friends who go there and expressed my devastation on what's happening. And we know directly people impacted on what's going on in Israel. So when I saw this, to me, I think, yeah, we have an opportunity to use our voice here on the City Council because words matter. And also I know, as someone in a group that gets oftentimes mislabeled, marginalized, also very much, as folks know, before I came on the council, we got called a very derogatory term as my family was crossing the street during Yankee homecoming. We have been subjected, and there's always unintended consequences. So for me, words matter, and especially in something like this. We know about what the horrific events of what transpired in Lewiston, Maine. To be honest, it doesn't take much for folks to be riled up, for folks to get emotional, for folks to follow social media, for people to be sitting in isolation, see things and words and get angry. And first of all, you start with hurt, you're shocked, you're upset, then you get angry. You just don't know where one might want to vent or express their emotions. For me, words matter. So I reached out to Rabbi Matthews, who I know very well, and to be honest, really what the opportunity and what I think folks want, immediate reaction, immediate support. You're here for us. Please let us know. You have our back. You know, the Jewish population here is a small population, and they did not feel like we spoke up in time. And we know how things in the city council is. I mean, short-term rentals, it took us 4 years. But something like this, we're not equipped to deal with it like that. But I thought, and I do want to acknowledge and thank Councilor McCauley for doing as timely as we can an act for this body here to speak up and to share these sentiments. What I do think is great, though, is when we could have the conversation. And so my reaction to what you guys see in my striking of those edits was done on the fly. I was not ready. Like I said, I had just seen it. And one of the most important things I struck was the third whereas, but partly because of the way it was written. And working and talking with Rabbi Matthews, I really like what you guys should have is an amendment, an amended version that kind of also talks and educates and let folks know a little bit more about maybe why are folks feeling the way they are. And I feel like the first draft or the first effort doesn't quite capture that essence. And I will read it here, you know, and I know folks have it. I hope everyone has it. And tell me if you don't.
Do we?
Yeah, it's in Meren. later
I
on.
think I put it on your desk, I did not.
No, thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so really, a couple of things, talking to Rabbi Matthews. You know, one is calling out Hamas as a terrorist group. They wanted that to be said. There's a terrorist group. They went after innocent civilians. And that was a really, really, really strong sentiment, that is what happened. The second one has to do with the fact that the state of Israel, not the government, but the state of Israel is the spirituality connection for the Jewish people and what that meant. And so, and the third point is facts about rising anti-Semitism in this country and ADL, especially after October 7th. So the facts that people know is incidents have been high, 400% higher than 2022. But at the same time, when I talk about unintended consequences, Rabbi Matthews actually pointed me to another statistic on Islamophobia. And so we put that in here too, that was reported, which tends to happen. Again, you know, consequences of what unfortunately kind of perpetuates amongst our communities. And then talking about both the fear and anxiety that people face. And it's sometimes hard because not all of us might be dealing day to day. So I feel like these four whereases capture kind of the essence of maybe that communication to the people that council kind of is recognizing. And then the resolutions here is, again, the condemnation against terrorism, especially towards those civilians in the state of Israel, which we've got here. And then instead of right to self-defense, Rabbi Matthews had a great term, the right to self-determination on what to do, which he thought was a better term, self-determination. And obviously to assure the communities, both local Jewish and Muslims, that we will speak out for them. So that's what I have. Thank you.
If I might, I think the motion to reconsider is on the floor first and second, and it needs a majority vote. I think maybe we should take a vote on that so that we can actually talk about it.
Move forward.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Okay.
Roll call on that.
Roll call on the motion to reconsider. Councilor Vogel?
Yes.
Councilor Wallace?
Yes.
Councilor Wright?
Yes.
Councilor Zede?
Present.
Councilor Cameron?
Yes.
Councilor Donahue?
Yes.
Councilor Khan?
Yes.
Councilor Lane?
Yes.
Councilor McCauley?
Yes.
Councilor Preston?
Yes.
And Councilor Sheehan?
Yes.
Okay, so the matter is on the floor for
Motion to refer
reconsideration.
to general government. No,
Motion,
go ahead.
As amended.
well, motion to approve as amended.
Second.
Oh,
Councilor McCauley.
Yeah, so I have to say I was surprised that, there was a violent terrorist attack and we needed to reconsider that, right? And I understand from the explanation tonight that was there. I also was taken quite aback from Communication 515 tonight because I think that it was tone deaf and insensitive to what we were trying to do here. I do admit that I did write this with the intent of getting something out quickly because I thought it was important to speak quickly and offer support about the fear and anxiety and isolation that a small community might have within Newburyport, and we should take every step that we can to speak out and control that. Just to add to the statistics that are here, not in this, but from the FBI, the Jewish population is 2% of the United States, but it represents 51% of the hate crimes, reported hate crimes in America. So anti-Semitism is here. It's around us all around, and we should be aware of it. When the at-large councilor reached out with some comments today, I was very open to the idea of it, especially since she had said she was working with Rabbi Matthews as well. So we get both speed and efficiency of words, and the wordsmithing is here. I'd be in favor of adopting, and I ask all of you to be in favor of adopting the language as rewritten. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor McCauley. Further discussion? All right. So what is the motion on the floor right now? Is it
Approve with the amendment
to approve
offered.
as amended?
I think
Okay.
it's approval with the amendment offered by Councilor Khan, seconded by Councilor McCauley.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
It hasn't been read into the record or written in yet, but maybe we don't need to, or maybe someone wants to.
Councilor Khan, would you do so?
Do you have it?
Okay,
I did.
well, actually, I will have Councilor McCauley as the, I really would like you to.
Thank you, Councilor, as well. So here's a resolution, whereas on October 7, 2023, Israel was a subject to terrorist attack perpetuated by Hamas, an organization recognized internationally as a terrorist group, which has resulted in the killing and wounding of over 2,500 people, mostly civilian, and the forcible abduction of hundreds of others. Whereas the state of Israel is the spiritual homeland of the Jewish people around the world, and since the attacks on October 7, 2023, the ADL has found an almost 400% increase in incidents of anti-Semitism in America compared to the same period in 2022. And whereas the Council of American Islamic Relations has reported incidents of Islamophobia and bias against Palestinian Arabs since the attacks on October 7, 2023, an almost 300% increase since 2022. And whereas these incidents have fostered an increase in fear, anxiety amongst both Jewish and Muslim citizens of all ages around the world, as well in our own community. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the City of Newburyport strongly and unequivocally condemns all acts of terror and violence against civilians in the State of Israel, and furthermore, be it resolved that the City of Newburyport stands with Israel's right to self-determination, and we pray for the victims and their families that have been torn apart and the safe return of hostages held by Hamas. And furthermore, be it resolved that the City Council of Newburyport strongly supports the safety of the local Jewish and Muslim community. We want them to feel assured that we will speak out against anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. Respectfully submitted on behalf of the City Councilors who choose to sign below. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor McCauley. All right, all those in favor of this amended version, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
President.
One present.
Gotcha. So what I will do, President, is we will give this a unique identifier number. Actually, it has one. We'll consider it the only resolution, and then we'll make lines for every councilor to sign if they wish
Thank you.
as the week goes on.
All right. Councilor Zaid.
If you're interested, President, in the cleanup, I would make a motion to waive the rules and take out communication 515 from general government and receive and file it, just so you have a
Second.
clean docket on this matter.
Thank you. That's fine, too. All those in favor of receiving and filing communication 515, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Thank you.
Present.
Okay. All right. Moving on to the orders again.
Let's see where we're at. We are down to 503. That's the emergency preamble authorizing the Whittier Vote Tech letter. And that's coupled with 503, which is authorizing the same.
Motion to approve
Yeah.
both the emergency preamble and the 503.
Second?
Discussion. I would open this one up to Chief of Staff Levine.
Well, thank you all for your consideration of this. Normally, we want to have some time for this to go to committee, but our preference would be to honor the emergency. Do this tonight. The school committee does have their next meeting before the next time that the council meets. That would be the second week of November. So we'd ask that we have this letter to them in time for them to consider. We're working on a pretty short timeline right now. So the Whittier School Committee has 2 meetings coming up. Their next one will include deliberation, I believe, but the one after that is when they are scheduled to vote authorizing this election that we're talking about this evening. That election will be held in January 16th, across the Whittier School Committee member communities. And we'll be asking them to approve of a bond that will pay for the renovation of the Whittier School project, which has now come down. The cost that's in the memo that's sent to you was over $400 million. We might be at, I think, $370 million now. It's come down a little bit, but it's still an extremely expensive project. And what we're asking to do is to, instead of going through the election process, instead have a process in which each town needs to approve, each member community, be it a town or a city, has to approve the bond project and also show that they have some kind of source for the funds as well. Because right now, it would obligate every community to come up with the funding, whether they've passed an override or debt exclusion or not. And that's a position that I can show you is difficult for this community at least, and the 11 others are in a very similar situation. Mayor Reardon is working with Mayor Burke and the others across the Whittier School Committee District to try to work on this situation, but there'll be similar letters sent to the school committee. We're asking for you to authorize the council president to also sign on to the letter with the mayor that will be sent to the school committee. I'm happy to answer more questions. I do just want to represent the views from our 2 Whittier School Committee members who did attend this meeting earlier tonight, but thought this would be taken before STRUs, so they understandably decided to have me deliver their message. I just want to let you know from them that Whittier will be holding an open house at Whittier School at the Whittier School, 1 to 4 p.m. This Sunday, and then they are also holding meetings about the project to inform member communities about what the project entails. The one in Newburyport will be on November 28th. We'll be sure to share information on that. They wanted to let us all know that an additional $38 million has been dropped from the project because it's been picked up by the MSBA, which is excellent news. And the group is going to continue meeting. The committee members would like to know they're doing everything they can to bring down the numbers on this project. They would say that right now, the average household in Newburyport would pay an extra $236 on their taxes to pay for this project for each of the next 34 years. They fit with 10 years, well worth it because of the work that needs to be done in Whittier. But that's the number that was given to me. As the numbers continue to be looked at and changed, we'll keep you updated on what that number is. But they would speak to the important role that Whittier plays in the region in providing our workforce of the future. So certainly not that Whittier does.
Question. So we've got Councilor Zeid, then Councilor McCauley.
Thank you. So I read the letter several times, and I really was doing some thinking about, well, what is it we're really asking for here? So we're asking for them to, one, take a different approach. You know, they have these 2 approach paths they can take to getting the funding. They can do a district-wide, their district-wide vote, and 50% plus 1 prevails of the voters that day. Or they can go town by town and seek that approval. I'm not sure this is an ask that we should focus on, because my sense is that it seems unlikely of a success. It seems unlikely to be successful. If they were to go to that path, they'd have to wait for town meetings to occur in the towns that are in the 11 communities. So in the interest of trying to get something that actually has a chance of success, I question whether that's the right ask to make. And the second one is, this concept of tying it to a debt exclusion. Obviously, it merits a lot more conversation, because it's not clear to me what happens if you have, I don't believe you can, they are entitled to have their own ballot if they choose. So that's where 1 and 2 start to conflict for me. They're entitled to have their own ballot by my read of the state statute. So we can't add another question to their ballot, so we have our own ballot at some other time, presumptively, and then what happens if one passes and the other one fails? I don't know what the answer is. So I guess where I'm going with this is a couple things. Number one is, it would really be beneficial to have the city solicitor properly read the agreement, which I've read a million times, and if you haven't seen it, I'm happy to circulate it, or you can get it from a variety of sources. But leaving the Whittier district is part of that document, and there are differing thoughts about what that actually means. I have my read on it, but I'll reserve that. And the other thing is to read GL 7116, which is referenced in this letter, which is, as most state laws, written completely insanely, in my opinion, because the use of double negatives is extremely, extremely difficult to understand what you can do. But it would be very helpful for us to know what our rights are in terms of, so the biggest question I have right this second is the ability of one community to veto the spending if it occurs through a popular vote. Do you happen to know the answer to that?
For a popular vote, there is no ability for
There
one
is that,
community
so
to
that
veto the
doesn't
spending,
exist. Okay.
because it goes across the district rather than the method we're asking for, in which one community.
It's what I was thinking would be true. All right, so my last thing is for my colleagues. I don't know how I'm going to vote on this, because I'm not sure. I get the point of wanting to send a red flag that we're really concerned about this, but the question we really have to think about is, do you want to be in the Whittier thing anymore? I mean, that's really the question, because here's my logic path. They have a building. The building is old. The building needs to be rebuilt. Now, they can bring it down from 440 to 3-something, but my math brain is telling me that it's got to come down by like 80% before the numbers even start to look remotely like they make sense for the 29 or 30 kids that we send. And I didn't bring my math with me tonight, but I mean, if the MSBA pays 62% and we're responsible for about 13% of the remaining 38%, so here I'm throwing a lot of numbers at you, but it's a pretty tall road to climb, hill to climb, to get to any number that I think anybody in this room would start to consider. So I acknowledge that we're in trouble, but I don't know that, what's our path? I guess my question is, what's our path going to be to decide what our future is going to be? And I do want to say that a lot of people have said it's unfair that the agreement was written to go by district population in each town for capital. But if you think about it, when they were setting it up, they had no idea how many kids were going to come from each community. So how would you set it up by tuition? So I mean, that's another angle we can try and explore. But the idea that they'll let us pay 30 out of 2,500 kids or whatever they have there for capital seems highly unlikely. Or we'd be capped at only ever sending 30. So we have some big internal problems, and I think we need a mechanism to have that conversation. I don't know if budget's the right place, or we don't have education anymore, but we do have purview over financial matters for education, so.
Well, education falls under general government too, but
and
anyway.
that too, yeah, on policy,
So
I'll yield with that for now.
Chief of Staff and then Councilor McCauley.
So we do have a memo that's from our city solicitor that I do need to supply to this body. We'll make sure that's sent around. That memo is written after the city solicitor reviewed all the documents that you mentioned, Councilor, and outlines what our options are. The path that you mentioned about trying to leave the agreement is certainly an option, but it does have limited effect in removing us from the financial obligations of this project. It could potentially help in limited in some ways, but we would still be on the hook for a significant amount. The city solicitor did recommend that we try this approach. It's one of the few points of leverage that we do have here is to try to ask the school committee to reconsider the way that they have this project. So that's one of the things we'd like to do. Certainly, what's also in that memo is that we can try to explore leaving the agreement, but that's a more difficult process that also might not have as much effect. So we're trying to explore the kitchen sink with this and take every approach that we can. I will make sure to share that memo so you can see what different approaches have been outlined for us by the city solicitor.
Thank you. Councilor McCauley, then Councilor Lane.
Yeah, so thank you, Council President. So I have a couple of housekeeping things. In the memo, it says that we're open to, we're liable for $2.3 million, yet in the accompanying Excel, it says $2 million. I think we should just make sure our numbers align on that. Secondly, the cost per enrolled student actually is divided by the wrong column. The cost isn't 32 million divided by 29 kids. It's because it's 29 kids for 30 years, right? That's the 30-year price. So it's actually 72,000, and all of these numbers would in this column would exponentially go down appropriately, because you actually multiply the 29 by the 2 million by the 29, and that gets us to a 72 million. So that's a couple of things. My real question is, why the emergency preamble, right? We had a presentation on this from the Whittier School Committee in June. They laid out what they were going to do. They laid out what the costs were going to be. They laid out the voting premise that was going to have to happen. For example, if they went town by town, they would have to coordinate every town meeting happen on the exact same day with city council meetings. That's what it says in their bylaws and statute, that they have to take a vote on the same day everywhere. So, I think we're tilted at windmills here a little bit. I understand why we're doing it. I understand it's a red flag, but, to ask us to handle some complicated type of legal linguistics here in 20 minutes, or to quote 5:15, 9 minutes of topic, when we had since June to be able to have this discussion, because I know some of us have been having this discussion, it is a little off-putting, I have to say. Again, I'm going to vote for this because it's the only avenue that we have, but we should be honest with everyone. When we got the charter school, they didn't ask us how we were going to pay for it. We pay $2.5 million a year out of our cherry sheet to pay for the charter school. We're going to have to pay either $2 million for a new school because we missed the time frame to get out, or we're going to have to pay $3 million for renovation, the way it's all laid out. You know, we're between a rock and a hard place, and, you know, we should remember that for later on discussion. We're still going to be between a rock and a hard place on that kind of stuff. So there is a question, why the emergency preamble now versus tackling this previously?
Councilor Lane?
I'm good, thank you.
And then Chief of Staff, if you want to answer any of those. Councilor Lane?
I'm good.
Okay. Councilor Khan?
Excuse me, wait a minute.
I'm sorry.
I was trying to get the...
No, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I thought I answered questions further. I apologize. As stated earlier, we want the emergency preamble so it's in time for the next meeting. The numbers have continuously been shifting, and the MSBCA ruled very recently that they'd be funding this project. So that's the reason for why we're moving now. It's because it was all dependent on if the funds would actually be coming through and they'd be moving forward on the project. So that's our reason.
Thank you. Councilor Khan?
Thank you, Council President. The timeline here is still very unclear, even with the answer, which I appreciate. I see that they have a meeting coming up. The one thing I would like is, you know, just even in passing, we have representatives now, I think just who were here earlier. And again, I'm not there at those conversations and meetings you guys are having a lot, but one of the things that would be very helpful is not really having a grasp of the changing number, right? And there seems to be several things that I just learned in just hearing the conversations between our two Whittier representatives. And so, you know, I understand that a letter is helpful, and this is like the first step to really just raise our hand and say, hey, speak to us. This is not something we could do. So I appreciate that step. However, I just want to make sure that this letter and what we're saying doesn't at all like tie us to any other types of commitments, as we heard the Ward 1 councilor mention as well. There's a lot of information, and again, it was all just conversations right here during that break we had, but hearing about the model of Newburyport High School and how Essex Tech is also something that wasn't in the picture, the charter documents that were done in 1988. There's a lot here that I feel like it would benefit us to understand, because right now we just hear this that we've been hearing for a long time. We've known this was going to be coming. But to understand and talk about those charter agreements and everything now, it's a little, I don't want us to rush this just because all these pieces are coming together. So I do want to express that. I agree with the counselors that spoke earlier. I'm a little, also don't want to stop progress or stop what needs to be done. So I will see what the other discussion says. But for me, I definitely see there's a lot to learn, a lot of good questions being asked, and also a fundamental question, too, on how we're delivering services to the kids here in Newburyport.
Chief of Staff Levine, did the letter get reviewed by Karis North?
Yes.
Councilor Z?
I'm sorry, I have more questions. So one is, what are the latest numbers that are official or so you said 300 something now?
Yeah, I'm sorry, we received new numbers today. We'll send those around to...
Okay, but it's sub 4 now?
It's slightly sub 4, yes.
Okay. My second question through the president, I don't know if the finance director happens to be on the call. Not that we're feeling good about Zoom, but if he is available. Okay, so my other question then through you, through the president to maybe the chief of staff would just be, has any thought been given to what we come from the other side? What would you put in the operating? What could you see putting in the operating budget? This is that old debt question that we go around all the time. So what if you come at it from the other end and said, well, the city could probably afford to put X in the operating budget to support debt, and that would support this much debt, and then if you go the other way, you can extrapolate out what the project has to be. Sure. My concern, like I said, just being honest, is that we have a gap this big, huge gap in terms of where they are, even if they came down sub 4, and MSBA goes up to so by my crappy spreadsheet, like MSBA would have to cover like 98% of this project in order for the number to crunch down to us making any sense of a number that probably could gain traction here. Like, hey, we got to put in 30 grand into the budget a year to support the debt for the next 30 years. So I guess my question on the letter, now to come back to this, so my question on that is, can the finance director, or can you, because you have to build the FY25 budget, give us an idea, or tell us the answer is 0, and so therefore everything must be a debt exclusion? Because that is an important line in the sand. If you said, look, the answer is 0, we have too many, and this is a shared responsibility, but you have to propose it, right? We have to approve it. So that's, again, a conversation we've been having for years on debt. So the last thing is, I might just make the suggestion that, to give the president direction on what to sign, that maybe this get trimmed back a little bit to read more like a red flag letter, just saying, hey, we're sort of making some noise here that we're in trouble on this and we want you to pay attention to us. And as opposed to making the specific demands that, again, I don't think they're going to change their course. They've already thought about this, and they were here, and they said, yeah, we're taking, to quote the superintendent, she said, we're taking the politics out of it. So, I mean, that was the comment that was made here about why they were going to a popular vote. So let's ask for something that doesn't end up sending us a bill for like $22 million that we will be really hard-pressed to pay.
So the suggestion is that we back into a number that we could commit to of the operating budget.
For the purposes of this letter, my suggestion to my colleagues here, we've done this in the past, rather than trying to sit here and edit sentences, just give the president the direction that we all agree as consensus that there's grave concern over these numbers and that the city likely does not have operating budget sufficiency to cover the scope that we're talking about, and we are seeking help and consideration on how to resolve that problem. Shorten it up to a page instead of saying, go to the single community vote thing, which I think they'll just throw in the shredder. And then that's for us to figure out. Like, we can put together a communication with Karis's thing and some numbers from Ethan, whatever. We can put it into committee of the whole, and now we have a vehicle to talk about it. And that, because that's a policy decision that has to be made. What do you want to invest here? Or do we need to go to the voters and say, what do you want to invest into this? Does that make sense? That's my thought. So I'm trying to get you 2 tracks so you can get your letter out tonight and we can get something to talk about.
No, certainly we need to continue the policy discussions.
So that would be my motion.
This is part of a coordinated effort across all the communities.
I'm sure we're not the only ones.
This is the preference. It's a negotiation. We don't expect them to go ahead and say, fine, we'll go that method instead. But perhaps it puts a pause and then we can offer this other set of financials instead, as you're saying. I think it makes sense.
So my motion would be, it's a little bit loose, but, to authorize the president to sign the letter with some edits, signifying the council's general consensus that there are concerns over the budget, there's concerns over the scope of the project, there's concerns over the process and the timing, and you guys can wordsmith it, and if everybody can get behind that, I think we could pass this and be done with it for tonight.
So, agreed. There was some, Councilor Cameron, did you want to have some discussion on that?
I think that all sounds fine. I'm kind of viewing this, and hopefully they're not watching on Zoom like other people are, but we need to get something. I understand trying to pull this together with multiple communities is probably not easy, but just some place marker. We reserve the right to pursue other avenues down the road. I mean, to me, I'll take a look at the overall agreement, but I mean, we could build our own school for 9 kids a year, $30 million, and they'd have the best vocational education in the history of the world. I mean, it's just outrageous money, and I know the formula is around overall school enrollment, not how many you're sending to Whittier. That's really out of whack, but it is what it is, but we're going to need some divine political intervention here, because that's just too big of a lift for that small of an enrollment. But again, get it out and empower the president to handle some of the details.
One clarification. So the motion on the floor is to authorize the president to sign, et cetera, Is that instead of the letter that we have before us on the motion to waive the rules, or is it in addition there too?
It's an amendment to that, so it's all the same
that letter
thing.
would change.
Yes.
Chief of Staff, you're good with this?
I think we can work something that still delivers the will of this body.
Okay. All right.
And just to say, we do have precedent on this where we've authorized the president to kind of figure it out, so we don't have to do it on the floor, frankly.
So
Got it.
motion to amend.
For lack of a better term, yes.
All right, so all those in favor of amending, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Point of order.
think we still have to vote on the EP.
Would you like to waive the rules so that we can go past 10 o'clock?
That was going to be for Counselor, it's 10:30, and it's for Counselor Wright to make.
10:30?
Yes, it's 10:30.
Oh, good.
It'll be the right motion at the right time, you can be assured.
Thank you for reminding us of what time it is.
Motion, wrong time.
But there is a motion to waive the rules and declare an emergency and approve 503 as amended on the floor.
All right, further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. Getting there, folks.
504
Yes.
is the local acceptance of a community impact fee on short-term rentals as sponsored by Councilor Khan.
Yeah. Motion to refer to Budget and Finance?
Second?
Do you want committee of the whole?
Oh, and let's do Committee of the Whole.
COTW.
Got it. Counselor Khan.
Yeah, I'll keep it really brief, it's getting late. I think you guys knew this was coming. I did ask Karis North, the attorney, to double check it because there's 2 votes we need to take to get 2 types of fees in. So I would just ask administration or, the chair of Budget and Finance, if we could at least make sure this language and the process is reviewed by them even before the meeting. But I don't know if they need to attend it, but that is something I really want to double check. Thank you.
All right, any other discussion? All right, all those in favor of sending 504 to BNF, Committee of the Whole, say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, committee items. Counselor Zede.
Motion to approve Order 502, grant acceptance of municipal road safety grant. All right, so this is the acceptance of a grant. It is in the amount of just over $7,000 to run about 11 months. I wanted to just say, as I had mentioned in committee, that thank you to the Finance Department. Ethan developed this form, so you're going to be seeing this form a lot more, the one that's in your packet. So things are laid out the same way every time we have a grant acceptance. I think it is a positive step and one that's welcome. And I did give him some feedback on it, but as we go through this, if you have any feedback, the idea was to anticipate the questions and have it readily available for you in a relatively short way to read it. So on to this specific one. This is a grant from NHTSA, which is the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, the click it or ticket folks that everybody loves. And so they're giving the city about $7,000 to run about 11 months. And the idea here is they're going to have 6 traffic safety events, so to say, or themes around which they're going to have additional police officers on duty. So like click it or ticket is one, impaired driving is another, and so they're going to basically fund a few extra shifts each of those months to focus on, say, targeted enforcement or something like that. So it could be 1 officer for a period of time covered by this grant, or it could be 2 officers on for 4 extra hours just running an extra traffic car in town or something like that for speeding, et cetera. So the overtime is for additional patrols. This was amended in the sense that the original one said there would be some traffic signs. There are no traffic signs. It's all for time. It's all for additional overtime to be paid. So sad to say there are no signs here. So each of the months, roughly during the 11 months, they'll try and do some of those themes. There are some reporting requirements that are done. And, could there be citations that come out of this? Absolutely. And so it's $7,000 and was recommended to you for acceptance by the committee 3-0.
Thank you, Counselor Zede. Further discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Motion to approve Order 498, gift acceptance 17,000 Newburyport trees.
Second.
So this is from Font. You've seen these come through again, same form, little shortened because this one's a little bit simpler. It's 20 trees with the 2 years of maintenance that we are, typically accustomed to now seeing. These are all in the area of the senior center, 331 High. You may remember a couple years ago some conversation about some of the trees didn't quite make it, so this I think is an opportunity to help restore some of those. The locations, as it says, were done in consultation or by the tree commission itself, which is not Font. That's the difference. Tree commission's the city, and then you have Font. And then last thing is we just had a question in committee, okay, how does the money get tracked? And it goes into its own account, and then they spend out of the account. So it does stay tight. And basically, Font has a good history of sort of replenishing that account when Ethan tells them, frankly, that it's getting a little bit low, so that we can keep the trees flowing in the city. It's 3-0 out of committee.
Thank you. Discussion? All those in favor of 498, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Next.
Next is Order 499, motion to approve.
Second.
This is a grant acceptance in the amount of $20,000, pardon me. It's listed here as the LSTA, but essentially what it is, it's a grant to the library, and the library here is going to use these funds towards accessibility initiatives that they have running throughout the library. So it's actually not one specific thing, but a number of things. So some of it is equipment. Most notably, it is what they call, I guess, that they call a loop sensor, which is for those who are hard of hearing. And then there's also an effort here out of these funds to purchase motorized scooter. And then there are also some other efforts around low vision, blindness, so-called visibility support, and then then lastly, besides the hard things, the buying of things, there's also some accessibility programs. And the goal here is to go above and beyond just being compliant, so to say, with requirements, but actually be accessible and welcoming so that all folks can use the library. In committee, we did ask if there was an approximate timeline to when some of these new things might be available, and the answer was, on a rolling basis, I guess as soon as they can get some of the things, some of the programs, I think they can start a little bit sooner. Some of the stuff they may have to order and wait for. There was, lastly, one thing you'll notice here is about the local match, which I'm sure on some grants will be perhaps more controversial than this one, but there was an effort here to catalog in a spreadsheet that was linked to it, basically in-kind hours and so forth, the typical office supplies and technology and things like that. And it was 3-0 in committee to recommend acceptance by all.
Discussion. All those in favor of 499, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Motion to approve Order 500, approval to pay prior year bills.
Second.
So unfortunately, we had kind of a spate of these, and I had hoped that we were done with them, but here are some more. So prior year bills occur when basically vendors invoice the city late for services and goods that should have been sort of charged to budgets in the prior year, but because the bill comes in after, we are still obligated to pay them, of course, but those accounts are now closed and everything rolled over and so forth. So you have the list here. It's about $22,000 spread out over a number of different areas. There were no major blockbusters here. I mean, the largest one was Mayor Tree Service to DPS for some outsourced tree work. So the only, I think, most important thing here is that in this case, all of these lines would have had sufficient budget to pay if they had been paid during the year. That wasn't the case with some of the ones we did before. They were out of money, and so we did ask about reconciliation. So the idea here with these is that in the next packet, per the finance director, we are expecting a reconciliation because now we're taking this year's money to pay last year's bill. So we need to take money back from free cash in the case of the general fund and retained earnings in the case of the enterprise funds so that we don't end up short on the current year and then have to have a never-ending cycle where we're always taking from today to pay yesterday and then tomorrow to pay today and so on and so forth. So it was $22,000 in the end, not blockbuster number, but it was 3-0 to approve in committee.
Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Last is a motion to continue Ordinance 129 to a date certain, which would be our next council meeting, which is 11/11? No. 11/10. 11/2? 11/2. November 2nd.
No.
No, it's 11/13.
What am I doing? No, that's like in 3 days. What is it?
13.
November 13th.
Our council meeting?
Yes.
Is November 13th.
November 13th. Yeah, so the reason I'm continuing this is it's my mistake. We did have a final amended version out of committee that was posted appropriately to the meeting, but that didn't go in the packet. So I did provide you all with just the amended hard copy with my beautiful handwriting that says 129 on it. So rather than put you on the spot for tonight, we'll just carry it over to next time. And then to close out budget and finance, do you want to take a vote on that?
All those in favor of continuing to 11/13, Ordinance 129, say aye.
Aye.
So just to close out on budget, we are not meeting this Thursday due to a conflict on my part, but we will be meeting next week. I had emailed you about that. We did not get the tax rate in this packet, so we're not doing that. but we do have some new matters that were referred. We also have some existing matters. As I had told you, we are nearing the end of the year, and our meetings are numbered, so I will try and go through all the things and provide you all with an email that just says what's left. But the tax rate will be coming in the next packet. That I am confident of, and we will take it up at that time. And we still have Atkinson, ARPA, and the sidewalks. Now that we have the road work thing, I'll communicate with the Chair of Public Works and Safety and see where there's synergy there. And that's enough buzzwords for one night. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Zaid.
Motion to approve appointment 436.
Second.
This is thank you. This is for the appointment of Sarah Landry as our new Director of Council of Aging. Sarah came before the Committee on Community Services. She talked about her resume, impressive resume, which you have seen in your packet. She highlights things like elder services, long-term care, community services, senior center in Londonderry, etc. Now in Pelham, she wants to bring her experience, breadth of experience in town. Her vision is to grow programming and advocating for more uses of the senior center. She does admit there's a bit of a learning curve, given that there's more items than she's been used to, like Meals on Wheels and transportation and some of the tax write-off programs and things like that. But there's plenty of staff to help her get up to speed. She's got plenty of experience doing that. I think she answered the questions from the committee very well. We voted 3-0 to approve her appointment.
Thank you. Discussion. Roll call for the appointments.
Yes. On appointment 436, Councilor Vogel.
Yes.
Councilor Wallace.
Yes.
Councilor Wright.
Yes.
Councilor Zede. Councilor Cameron.
Yes.
Councilor Dunningham.
Yes.
Councilor Khan.
Yes.
Councilor Lane. Councilor McCauley.
Yes.
Councilor Preston.
Yes.
Councilor Shan.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion to approve Order 497.
Second.
This is the administrative order submitted by the administration to take NYS and create a recreation and a youth service enrichment department out of each. In doing so, it brings a little more order and structure to the organization. The first breakup of this, I'm not going to go into the history. It's in our packet, and we all pretty much know that. The proposed structure is to take a recreation group and combine it with the adult recreation portion of that as well. There's a chart in here that says the youth program, that's known for its parks program and vacation week and seasonal enrichment programs, and all of those things will be combined with the families, the touch-a-truck and the entertainment programs, as well as the adult programs like hiking and recreational games, et cetera, along the way. No adult is going to join a youth recreation program, and nor should they, and vice versa along the way. So calling this a recreation program kind of separates it out and allows it to grow and develop and evolve on its own. The funding sources will remain the same. The city, from its operating budget, will pay salaries and benefits and those types of things. But the majority of their revenue is derived from user fees along the way. Subsequently, we'll have to clean up our user fee ordinance along the way, not tonight, but we'll do that to make sure that it aligns more closely along the way. It's good, but we want to make sure that we clean it up and make sure that it's as tight as we can going forward. That leads us to the second part, which is the youth development and services. This is responsible for positive youth development, engaging youth in healthy activities outside of formal school and other type of programming. It supports the mental health and substance abuse prevention, which is spearheaded by the Beacon Coalition going forward. So it includes the Enrichment Center at Kelleher Park and some of the other development programs and social support programs that they have. Again, they're funded, and again, they have a model that's working today. We're just putting it in a little bit more structure. The funding is from the city operating, partially from the city operating, a little less, because they are grant funded, both with Tower Grant, which is private, and Mass Call Grant that goes along the way. There's benefits to this and their success by leveraging these grant funds. The grants now come in cohorts we might call them regions or cluster cities, however we want to talk about that. I had the privilege of attending the ECAB breakfast that was over in Salisbury. I got to listen to the contact from Amesbury and Georgetown and Salisbury talk about how the work that we're doing here is being able to be transposed over there and great success. I was able to talk to Mayor Gove and Neil Harrington, Town Director Neil Harrington along the way, and they said that they're very supportive of these types of programs, and I was able to also, as an aside, talk to the people who run the Mass Call grant, and they were very much in favor of this kind of structure to give a little bit more organization, to give a little bit more structure, so a little bit more visibility. And from our standpoint, in terms of budgeting, we get a little bit more transparency, which helps the organization, especially in their messaging on some sensitive matters that sometimes matter. So overall, the committee voted 3-0 enthusiastically to approve this. We think it's a great way to launch them into 2024 and beyond. So I encourage, I'll answer any questions that might have come up, but there weren't really a lot of questions. Most people were supportive of the work that's done, and again, part of this is messaging as much as anything else. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor McCauley. Questions, anyone? Councilor Zaid.
I just have a few comments. So I'll be happily supporting this tonight. I would just say a couple things. One is my read of the plan would not support an argument in the future that additional staff is needed. That's not what I gathered from this. So when we get into the budget next year, I'm just putting my marker in that I think the way I'm reading the plan, and if I'm wrong, I would like to be corrected so I understand that the staffing that is on hand, the head count, in other words, what we look at on the first page of each budget book for the thing, for each department is sufficient to handle this. That's number one. Number two is, one of the goals here, I think, was some level of formality that didn't exist before. It's just not that I think there was a question that they existed per se in the literal sense. But to that effect, I think now it's the same as everything else. So my personal expectation is the grants will come through just as we just did several grants, including the large ones, so that there can be transparency around that. Number two is, the chair mentioned it, but I just want to double up on it, that the user fees is something that has long been in the gray. It's not customary for departments to set their own fees, even when they run programs. The President and I did the parks one to rent out parks. It was a nightmare, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying there is no other department I'm aware of that just sets a fee based on whatever factors they have. And those factors are very legitimate, the cost of the place, the cost of the teacher if it's some kind of a program, but those kinds of things can't happen anymore, in the sense that the whole point of this is formalization. To me, it's always been a city department, and so it's subject to the same rules and parameters and so forth, and so that means that so that was not noted under ordinances that need to change, but I think there's going to have to be a fee schedule section that specifies that there's a certain amount they change, and when they're charged, and when there's a desire to change that, it will need to flow through this body and be voted on in a public forum. So, you can't just raise the prices or lower the prices, scholarships, all those things that the money, which has been, I think, a big challenge to follow, admitting and understanding that it's very complicated with their timing, but that's the nature of the business. So we'll be supporting. I just wanted to note a few things that I'm hoping to see going forward.
Councilor McCauley.
Just a point of clarification on the head count issue. The head count, the conversation we had around head count is there's two. There's an organizational head count that is the basic framework, but in summertime and seasonal, they hire seasonal workers as well. And so just when you notice that, it's the same way we account for Parks Commission seasonal work and things like that, that there is an influx of seasonal, and they need to be kept in the category of seasons.
Got it.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Do we need a roll call on this?
I would do a roll call,
All right.
establishing.
Roll call.
Roll call on Order 497, approving the same. Councilor Vogel?
Yes.
Councilor Wallace?
Yes.
Councilor Wright?
Yes.
Councilor Z?
Yes.
Councilor Cameron?
Yes.
Councilor Donahue?
Yes.
Councilor Khan?
Yes.
Councilor Lane?
Yes.
Councilor McCauley?
Yes.
Councilor Preston?
Yes.
Councilor Shan?
Yes.
Thank you.
All set?
Yes. We are going to have a meeting I'm just not exactly sure yet. We're tightening up a couple of things going forward, but
Okay.
we will have one prior to the next meeting.
Okay. So the next one is general government. We have ours scheduled for this coming Thursday. I will change the time to 6 since I know that you're not going to have budget and finance. It's basically, we've gotten, the direct report got some of his questions answered, as did we on some of the Brown School memos. So we're going to discuss that. We're going to discuss that on Thursday for the 3 communications. It's all committee of the whole items. So please come if you want to at 6 o'clock. License and permits.
Nothing tonight.
Public Works and Safety.
Point of order, point of information. Did we, and I might have missed it, late file ordinance 164 zoning amendment, global oil, did that get referred?
P&D and committee of the whole.
It did, okay, thank you.
And just so folks know about that one, they did agree to do the joint hearing on November 15th. That's been put on the docket, and the development agreement that's going to go along with this should be coming into our packet for the next meeting. So it'll just be an amendment to this item, to the global oil agreement. All right, last but not least, Councilor Wallace, welcome back.
Thank you. I hope you don't mind if I don't
You
keep getting
can
up
sit
and
down.
Thank you. All right, motion to approve application 163.
Second.
All right, so this was a letter/application that came in to ask for approval for planters that was provided in a sketch on here. Planters to remain throughout the winter season outside of Bar 25. So they're on State Street and the alleyway there. These planters are in the summertime adjacent to their parklets, but apparently they need to store them on their own, and it gets pricey, and they were wondering if they could leave them out and put, seasonal plantings in there, make sure that it's attractive and whatnot. So there was a section, and I apologize, I don't have the number, but there was a section that any commercial business can put planters out for beautification without approval of the council, but the council can remove them at any time. However, in this meeting, we thought this was a little bit more than your standard planter, because they are 1 feet 9 inch wide. So the concerns that came up were, ADA accessibility, and basically what we came up with was a condition to approve it, in a pass 3-0, approve it for 1 year with requirement that it be approved by the ADA coordinator. And that is where we were at. And the reason that came to PWS is because it is in the public right of way. So that's how that works.
All right. How was it approved, 3-0? Did I hear that right?
3-0, yes.
Okay. Further discussion? Councilor McCauley.
Yeah, just, I'm the one who asked for the 1-year piece of this, and I think it's important. We're not sure how these are going to work out, and we think this is the best way to get it to a compromise with the owner along the way. And so we've laid out what we're expecting of him and his commitments to us, and so we think we can run that through the clerk's office and the building department, and as well as building department, who's also the ADA coordinator, and make sure that we stay on top of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor McCauley. Further discussion? Councilor Wallace.
I'm wondering if we should officially amend or add the conditions right now, just that it's on the record. So I would make a motion to add the amendment approved for 1 year and subject to ADA coordinator approval.
All right.
That's what I have.
Okay, great.
All right.
First and seconded.
A second.
Second.
All right. All those in favor of the amendment, say aye. Aye. All those in favor of application 163, say aye. Aye. All right.
Thank you. All right. Motion to approve ordinance 161, Pleasant Street, 15-minute parking space.
Second.
The sponsor on this is the counselor from Ward 2, and the proposal is to change one of the parking spaces on the southern side of Pleasant Street at the intersection of State and Pleasant Street to 15 minutes to allow for people that are coming into the downtown area that are picking things up and don't need to stay for very long. We approved it 3-0, but I will defer to the sponsoring counselor if she wants to explain a little bit of the background.
Sure, thank you. Happy to stretch my legs. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councilor Wallace. So this came to me from a business constituent in Ward 2, and as it turns out, it's really going to be very, very beneficial for several of the businesses that are short-term, high turnover businesses, including Richdale's, Angie's, the pizza places, the coffee shop. So working with the clerk's office, the parking clerk, we determined this would be the best spot. It's also going to subsequently, hopefully, cut back on a lot of the abuse of the handicap parking spot that is right almost across from there at the top. The last space before you turn onto Pleasant Street is an HV spot that gets routinely abused to run into the coffee shop in Richdale. So it's kind of a win-win, and hopefully we'll see that shift of driving behavior, and yeah, that's pretty much sums it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Donahue. Further discussion? This is an ordinance.
It
so
is.
Roll call.
This is approval of ordinance 161. Councilor Vogel?
Yes.
Councilor Wallace?
Yes.
Councilor Wright?
Yes.
Councilor Z?
No?
Councilor Cameron?
Yes.
Councilor Donahue?
Yes.
Councilor Khan?
Yes.
Councilor Lane?
Yes.
Councilor McCauley?
Yes.
Councilor Preston?
Yes.
And Councilor Shan.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, motion to approve ordinance 162,
Second?
amended parking restrictions on Toppins Lane. All right. This is sponsored by the counselor from Ward 5. This is a revision to a change we had made a while ago for additional safety measures at Toppins Lane and Highland Avenue. It's a greater distance away from the crosswalk. It's a very busy area because of the high school, kids walking to the middle school. We have the MEVA buses, there's truck traffic, et cetera. So this actually came from the DPS director. There had been some discussions in the Traffic Safety Committee about general safety in that area, but the DPS director had brought this forward as a solution to make it even safer, because that crosswalk from Highland over to across the side of the high school is very heavily traveled, and it can be very hard to see. So this will help improve visibility and whatnot. So, and it was approved 3-0.
All right. Discussion.
Just want to point out the Scribner's error on Toppins Lane. It only has one A in it.
They're going to repaint the lines there?
It's about 10 Toppins Lane.
Where was the Scribner's error?
Yeah.
It's in the title.
Oh, in the title. Okay, yes. I do not know if they're going to paint the lines there.
They are.
All right.
I like the extra A.
I like the way it's spelled.
On a Dodge.
Motion to change the name of the street to Top Hands.
All right. So, motion to approve 162. Roll call.
Councilor Vogel?
Yes.
Councilor Wallace?
Yes.
Councilor Wright?
Yes.
Councilor Z? Councilor Cameron?
Yes.
Councilor Donahue?
Yes.
Councilor Khan?
Yes.
Councilor Lane?
Yes.
Councilor McCauley?
Yes.
Councilor Preston?
Yes.
Councilor Shan?
Yes.
That was a yes, Councilor Z?
Yes. Thank you.
Councilor Wright, I think you have something to say.
Move to waive our rules about our time of close and continue the meeting beyond 10:30.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Present.
I'll give it a present as well.
All right, Councilor Wallace, last but not least.
All right, motion to approve ordinance 163, federal street handicap space. This is sponsored by the counselor from Ward 1. There's a church at Federal and Beck, and they are asking for handicap space just during church times from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. And this apparently was already vetted through the DPS director, and it sounds like it works for him. So we approved it 3-0. And just a point of order, I did notice there's an error in the text here on Federal Street, located in front of the between. So I may defer to the sponsoring counselor, but we approved it 3-0.
In front, yeah. Strike just in front of 29 Federal Street. Just Scribner's.
Scribner's, okay. Counselor Khan?
Can I just ask, I don't know if I need to get up, is there a reason we're not saying Old South Church? Because that is 29 Federal Street. It helps people know. Like, I had to look it up and see it was Old South Church.
No particular reason, just use the address. That's what I had, so.
Yeah, there were two errors. There was that one, and then in the first sentence, in front of the between.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe you were going to say in front of the Old
South Church.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what happened in between 57 feet and 77 feet.
So, Scribner's errors?
I think that was me.
It's okay.
Good fault.
It's marked. There's paint on the street.
We will make it legible.
Thank you.
Counselor Cameron, do you have your hand up?
I'm in support of this, certainly. I think that seems great. Just how do we, in 5 years, is this going to show up on some city clerk tickler where you check that in sort of a general question? I think I've emailed you about it. Like how sometimes we have deadlines and sometimes we don't.
Well, almost always we have deadlines now, but they're 2 years.
Yeah.
I think.
Those are all in ordinance?
Yes.
It should be okay.
Yeah. I mean, we do go through every now and clean them up, and it's a good thing because, particularly in the neighborhoods where it's in front of someone's house,
like person might change.
They get better, they get worse, they move, whatever, and it's there forever.
Thank you.
All right, further discussion? Roll call.
So approving 163, Councilor Vogel.
Yes.
Councilor Wallace.
Yes.
Councilor Wright.
Yes.
Councilor Z.
Yes.
Councilor Cameron.
Yes.
Councilor Donahue.
Yes.
Councilor Khan.
Yes.
Councilor Lane.
Yes.
Councilor McCauley.
Yes.
Councilor Preston.
Yes.
Councilor Sheehan.
Yes.
Thank you.
Executive session.
All
Don't
right,
go
and
anywhere.
just briefly, I think we have on the books Public Works and Safety meeting Tuesday next week, where we will be discussing the streets plan.
How are you going to do that on Election Day?
Never mind. I will be revising that,
Okay.
and we'll figure out a time.
Hyper aware. I know, right?
Good of the order?
Yeah.
All right, executive session, folks. So I believe I have to declare that pursuant to MGL 30AS 21A3, there will be an executive session for the purpose of discussing strategy with respect to litigation as an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the city. I declare we have that.
Do we have to state the topic?
Nope.
We actually
There's-
ran this language by the city solicitor
Okay.
specifically, so.
Motion to go into executive session on that declaration.
Second?
Do you have to announce we're not coming back out?
You do.
And we are not coming back out.
Thank you. So
Roll call.
that was moved by, seconded by,
Councilor McCauley.
and roll call. To go into executive session, not coming back out, as aforementioned, Councilor Vogel,
Yes.
Councilor Wallace,
Yes.
Councilor Wright, Councilor Zede, Councilor Cameron,
Yes.
Councilor Donahue,
Yes.
Councilor Khan,
Yes.
Councilor Lane, Councilor McCauley, Councilor Preston,
Yes.
and Councilor Sheehan. Thank you. We are in executive session. We're going to close that Zoom down.